Mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
I love to see my people party with me, man. Good to see you, Black Brown, Sweet Nikita, Miss Rhonda. Hey, happy birthday, Miss J. Hey, Rhea, Sweet Sharita. Party with me all night long. Say what? That's right, baby. Bring it to the front. Hey, Janine. Well, guess what? Hey, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Black Brown, I get a little happy when I see you. What? Baby, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Francine, I get a little happy when you party with me. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, Jay, hey, Randy, I get happy when you party with me. Guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, Cole,
Come on in,
I get
come
a
on in,
little
come on
happy.
in. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Happy when I see you. What? When I see you, yeah.
Peace.
Listen, fellas, I put your picture on my mirror. Start to blush when somebody said your name. And my stomach is a pain. See you walk in my direction, I go the other way. I start to stutter when I speak. Try to stand on my knees.
Oh man, I don't know how you all are doing. I needed this.
Anybody, can you tell me what it means? I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window.
Needed
It's gonna
this.
stop for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, see you.
Morning, good morning,
Hey,
good
Marlon,
morning.
you sexy boy. Hey. Oh, no. When I see you. Hey, fellas, listen. I scribble X and O's on my
That's what's
notebook.
up.
Checking out my hair and my nails. I feel myself up in the zone. I get nervous.
No
when you
worries.
call.
Thanks, Poncho. You
See
too,
your
my
face,
man.
I hear my favorite song. Should I send an email at home? I
Wow.
wonder if you know, or do you have a clue?
What you know about
I lay my
Zanzibar?
head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Was gonna stop for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah. Oh, yeah. See you. Yeah. Marlon, so sexy, boy. Oh, no. When I see you. Listen, something now is taking over me.
Peace.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna run, I'm just gonna stay
Oh,
here
oh,
and see.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, no. See you. Sing it so
Republic
sexy,
Garden.
boy. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I was more often next door at State of the Union.
When I see
But
you.
absolutely.
Hey, Fox, hold me down, listen. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, sweet Sunita. Hey, get happy when you party with me. Hey, Janine. When I see you, yeah. I get a little happy. Hey, Tony. I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Tim. When I see you.
like, what I like.
All right, everybody. Before I bring Sudip up, just very quickly, do all the things. Welcome, support the platform, all of that. Links in the show description to more Sudip's work included. But I just wanted to just quickly, so Mega, off the top of my head, I would suggest going to Eventbrite and putting go in the search and see what comes up over the 2 weeks that you're in town. I that's how I follow shows, or I just catch them when they come out here to Nottingham's in Columbia, Maryland. But yeah, so that would be my quick suggestion. So please, avail yourself of that. All right, everybody. So Sudip, welcome back to the platform. This is our ongoing public discussion of the Donut King Project, our look at the cavernous gaps between the narratives as it relates to Black and Asian economics. And links in the show description to the full playlist and more. Sudip, welcome. Good morning. How you feeling?
Good morning, Jared. Excited. Just had just really pumped after July 4th, who can't be? So I'm excited.
Who can't? I was very tempted to ask you, to be perfectly honest, if first of all, I needed that. I needed that intro because my energy is very low. The lack of sleep has been kind of severe, and the partying, all the 4th of July celebrating. I'm just days, even days after the event, I'm just exhausted. But I was very tempted to ask if what you would think about if we took a few minutes to review Bill Clinton's statement on the 250th.
He's still alive.
Oh, so Bill Clinton, Obama, George Bush, and Biden all sort of got together to, in unison, condemn Trump. And then Clinton published this statement.
You mean the same? I'm fine with that because I've been ever since seeing Obama
let's
stuff.
Do this. They're both in this. All right. So I was gonna ask you. Then I was like, I don't know, man. I'm tired. This is a little bit of a. We could argue that it's on point, but it's.
That's. I mean, it's July 4th.
But so the real quick, the way I was linking them. Oh my God. So there was so yesterday on Earn Your Liberation, we started to we brought this up, but we never addressed it in full. And I'm a little bit wishing we had. So I wanted to start. So the Afro think tank put out this thing, 20 things Barack Obama did for Black people, to remind people that when some of us criticize, so it says the claim that he did nothing is a lie, the record speaks. And they go through these 20 things that are supposedly Barack Obama did for Black people. And they're just wildly misleading. And part of this recreation of the myth of this country and the myth of what this country is about and where it's headed. But all of these things from they give him credit for cutting the Black uninsured rate to historic lows, but compared to what? And he left many people and underinsured. So they may have technically gotten some insurance, but it's not enough for serious medical needs. And the healthcare crisis is still, and what he really did was protect private insurance companies and assured that we would never get to national health care. The expansion of Medicaid, again, same kind of thing. Like, again, compared to what? It's still insufficient. The Fair Sentencing Act, which came very late, but and then they gave him credit for reducing the disparity from 100 to 1 between crack and cocaine to 18 to 1 in terms of sentencing between the two drugs. But in terms of overall mass incarceration, surveillance, increasing the police budget, and on and on and on. 1033 program. I mean, all of these things he happily stood by. So I mean, I could keep going through all of this, but this was just, they're just empty. Appointed a record number of black judges. So what? And actually, that is relevant to the discussion we're going to have today. The symbolic inclusion, strengthened HBCUs. Please don't. Again, I could for days talk about how this is a fallacy and what it means to. And by the way, back when he was president, I did an interview with I'm forgetting her name. Arnett, I think was her last name. But at the time, she was the head of HBCU Digest, and they had graded Obama as a D. They had given him the grade of a D for his support for HBCUs. So Trump is given credit for strengthening HBCUs at this point. So there's just all these, the black unemployment rate fell to record lows. Again, compared to what and with what level of sufficiency and income rates, et cetera, and so forth. Investigated police misconduct. No, he increased their budget. And then, of course, he raised the bounty on Assata Shakur. And of course, he did AFRICOM. And of course, he did Libya and all these other things that they would prefer that we. And then they give him the credit for breaking the color barrier. I mean, so this is just to me disappointing. But following up from that, I saw this video here, and I'll invite you to where they go through the Midas Touch
former
channel.
President.
So one thing, let me just say this quickly. Midas Touch channel recently took over the Joe Budden podcast, I think, for the most popular podcast or something like that. And they and others who support them were praising them. I do watch their channel. I watch them as I would have watched once upon a time CNN or the local news or something like that. But I note that since they become this enormous platform, it's just a reminder of the limitations on it, because they are at most liberal Democrats, and it's just a reminder again of for me is the limitations of this country's politics playing out again in national media, even in the so-called new digital space. We see a replication of the same kind of politics rising to the top and sort of setting a limit on the discussion. So this is presented by the Midas Touch as just a wild positive that the presidents got together, and then Bill Clinton put out my statement on America at 2:50. So I'm going to let the host here read through some of this, and then I'll invite you and our chat to chime in. And I'll put the link to this in the show description. Others can find the full statement if they like, but I think that this in some ways summarizes what
Bill Clinton issue a statement bashing Donald Trump's America 250 fraud, the utter failure that was the America 250 grift. Here's what Bill Clinton wrote, and Bill Clinton really hasn't put out that many statements lately, and it's just notable too, because what was it yesterday, Donald Trump, or 2 days ago when he was doing that interview with Usha 50 in the state of by former President Bill Clinton. Statement from President Bill Clinton on America 250 and the state of the country. 250 years ago in Philadelphia, our founders embarked on a radical experiment and declared a new nation rooted in the ideal of equality with an elected government charged to advance life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Since then, our government of, by, and for the people have become the longest lasting, continuous democracy in the history of the world. Our road from 1776 to today has been, in Abraham Lincoln's word, piled high with difficulty at every turn.
So my framing of this, I want to just be clear, is that, and then Sudip, I'm happy to have you respond, even critique my position here, is that this liberal approach is why the country is where it is today, and why it is not more advanced from where it is today, and my point where I was talking about that this is now the more popular channel, or one of the most popular channels or podcasts, and is promoting this very Bill Clinton-esque liberal mythological version of the history of this country, is the flaw that while they are presented as the only viable alternative, why the country is where it is and why it's so limited but anyway, all right, let me just, all right.
There have been forces of reaction seeking to claw back the extension of our rights and liberties to more people. But by and large, thanks to celebrated leaders and everyday Americans alike, we have stumbled in the right direction, widening the circle of opportunity, deepening the meaning of freedom, and strengthening the bonds of our community. Today, we celebrate this milestone amid another period of deep division, renewed questions about America's future and the role in the world, and serious threats to our own institutions and to our democracy itself. The people in charge have unleashed masked agents on American communities to seize people from their homes, workplaces, and the street. They have started an unconstitutional war on a whim with no clear objectives or exit strategy and zero regard with the consequences to the lives of millions of people around the world. With the help of lifetime appointees to the Supreme Court and a compliant Congress, they have weaponized government to settle personal.
And remember when Obama and the Democrats could have made their own appointments, but have only made appointments themselves that have been extremely limited in their positive impact on this country and the world.
Of course, prosecute enemies, stamp out free speech, and made the federal government a new profit center for themselves and their allies. Their New Deal is socialism, and for the super rich and their own enrichment, even if it means increasing poverty, inequality, and illness at home and around the world. Socialism for the super rich. That's who gets the socialism. That's, by the way, that's like my line.
So there's a little bit more here I just want to show, because anyway, you'll see.
To ignore and outright deny our past flaws while banning books that say otherwise from our libraries. And they select even our military leaders based on their vision of political correctness over ability. But this isn't the first time we've come close to the edge. Throughout our history, we've thought about what it means to make our union more perfect and who belongs. So far, at every major turning point, we have chosen inclusion over division. In the early days of the Republic, by building a national economic and legal system. During the Civil War, by preserving.
They built a national economic and legal system at the founding of this country. And then check this. All right, anyway,
the Union and ending slavery in the early 20th century.
They and again, they take credit for ending slavery, not for starting it. And then look at how he frames. It's a confession in some ways. If paid attention to this next line here.
As we move from an agricultural to an industrial society, by making our government stronger to preserve competition, promote basic safeguards for labor, and provide the poor, the elderly, and the infirm in the 60s.
So as he says, he confesses that, as I'm framing it, the ending of slavery as it's understood properly in this country only came about because this country moved from an agricultural to an industrial society where the plantation economy had to be destroyed, upended, and revamped for so-called modern industrialism and modern capitalism, or capitalism with technological advances and support. So he's acknowledging, like, that's why slavery was ended. And then this nonsense about stronger preservation of competition is patently absurd. I mean, it
70s, by advancing civil rights and women's rights and protecting our natural resources from plunder. And at the dawn of the new millennium, by moving into the global information age in a way that distributed the benefits of our interdependence to more people. Our founders were wise when they gave us our mission to form a more perfect union. They knew America would never be perfect, but could always be better. That's what they meant by more perfect. We've done that by being.
So this is why in the 1990s, as we're going to be talking about today, and in the 2020s, there's still all of these similar discussions about economic inequality and the need for boycotts to address that inequality and the violence and the imposed hostile relations of various communities. So, but Anyway, yeah,
courageous enough to acknowledge our flaws and missteps, and then bold enough to leave them behind for brighter tomorrows. That's the lesson of our first 250 years. We can always do better in how we treat one another in person and online.
Okay, so that's his basic nonsense, and then I just want to show this one other part that they included here, where we can come back to this guy for a little more.
What message do you have to Americans?
Remember what's best in us. The basic principle upon which this country was founded, which is we don't have rulers, we don't have kings or monarchs or aristocracies. We have citizens. And if we hold true to that idea, that we, the people, have been gifted this chance of self-government, if we pay attention to our responsibilities and our duties, and if we extend respect and thoughtfulness to our fellow citizens, even if we disagree with them, if we understand that part of this democratic project is to sort through our differences in peaceful, legal ways, then I'm confident that we're going to have another 250-year run that's going to be just as good.
So, all right. So
Jared.
let me just, go ahead, my man.
I'm trying to get more healthy. I'm trying to reduce the stress. You were really torturing me. Like, it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was like, so I wrote down so many things. Obama is a punk. That's one. I wrote down, this is the same Clinton who was on Epstein Island. So he should stop worrying about the country and worry about his own hands and mind. And then I am also just flabbergasted at the way the lies by omission, as far as I could tell. The only time he mentions capitalism, look, I know King said this at one time in his life, socialism, but he changed, and Clinton is not King. So Clinton, I would trust King in moving people to a certain place, right? But the only time that capitalism is mentioned is to decry it as socialism, and then, which is capitalism. Like, I really hate when more modern people do the whole, well, what we have is not even capitalism, it's socialism for the rich. It's like, no, that's capitalism. That's exactly how capitalism is supposed to work. It's supposed to subsidize. Our labor subsidizes them, even when we don't see it as explicitly bad. And then the other issue, which is wild to me, so that's one, not a single, I'm glad they sort of mentioned or implied African Americans and Africans, but there is no mention of indigenous disposition at all. And I think that's really stunning, because I felt like this country, at least rhetorically, was quote unquote on the right track. But now you can tell that they're trying to, that pressure has kind of unfortunately winded down on them to do certain things. And that's why you see companies even saying, let's just ditch the quote unquote woke stuff that we pretended to care about. But now the language, to me, this sounds just like if Clinton was president anyway. This is the same kind of speech he would have made in the 90s. He would have said something about African Americans, which is fine and fair, but then again, it's not meaningful, like you said. But then he would never mention anything about indigenous disposition. And what's interesting about his time in office, I think he did apologize. Like, it's so this speech is so Clintonian. Because he apologized to the Hawaiian people, I believe, to the native Hawaiian
apologized
people.
No, I think he wouldn't apologize for slavery. I think there was some sort of commission that he recognized, but or something that they helped put together. But there was no.
I never heard him apologize for slavery.
Yeah, I don't
but
think
he definitely apologized for the Hawaiian people. But just like a typical Democrat, nothing happened. And he just said, well, we're sorry.
Sorry.
And the native people since then have had to deal with even worse cost of living situation and their water getting toxified. And there's just so many things that are just amazing to me. Radical experiment, the claim that we're stumbling towards the future, that itself is also so funny, because the future is never promised. Even some Marxists back in the day would do this inevitability formula, which is not always true, but there is always a tendency to view that. It's not promised. I think we're in a worse position than we were in a long time, so nothing's stumbling anywhere. And then Obama, again, Obama is a punk. He goes off. I showed my partner the quote about Washington, how he literally says slaveholder too. Like, he didn't even parse it to make himself feel even a little bit good. He just said, yeah, he's a slaveholder, but a brilliant man. And she and others said, when I showed that to them, it's like, why did he even have to say anything? And it's clear they're trying to they see the tea leaves, as in the U.S. empire going through it. And now they're trying to reassess something that you and Renee talk a lot about. They're trying to reposition themselves as the right stewards of American profitability and future. So there's just so many things. Like, I wrote down, of course, not just the Epstein stuff, but, overthrew, I believe under him was Aristide.
The Clintons and the whole Haiti connection thing is which comes up in Bitter Fruit, but is by the way, is another connection,
right?
Is huge. And they with the kidnapping, with the undermining of the and mining, pun intended, but the undermining of the economy, they're just. And then also, as Dre pointed out in the chat, Clinton presided over CAFTA and NAFTA and the further destruction of the labor, the destruction of welfare. He there's just all of these, and never mind the fact that then they're standing there next to George Bush,
right?
Who even in that clip, the Midas Touch channel has to acknowledge was a challenge for the Democrats, he said, because Bush was a menace, and people are now rebranding George Bush Jr. as the good old days, and as if this wasn't. And I want to be careful how we talk about this, because we got in trouble with this platform for raising discussions of this, but whose path to the presidency was fraught with controversy. Can I say that? And then who was himself a warmonger and a privateer. All this stuff, all of it just so that they can say, let's get back to the rationality of the Democratic Party and the mainstream Republican Party. And I just was
I just let you know there's a storm, so like maybe I lose power, but because it was like flickering. Wow. Yeah, but
okay.
But why I was also thinking, because I think Dre also did say this in the chat. I'm now getting more familiar with because my mind doesn't work that way. I get attention, my attention deficit. I have attention deficit like issues, but I think, but to your point, I wrote down 100, no more than that, probably 200,000 Iraqis died due to sanctions under, Clinton.
I thought it was more than that. I thought it was like 500,000.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's because that's when
Albright was asked about it.
Albright
it's worth it.
Yeah,
it's worth
it.
So,
and then I remember when Dick Cheney was on one of those Sunday morning shows and was asked about it, and he literally said, "So."
Yeah,
he was like,
paved the way.
He was like, "So what? Like,
so what?
This is." Of course, this is a man that can shoot his buddy in the face with a shotgun and have the man apologize to him. So I don't want to mess with Dick Cheney. Like, that's the thug of all thugs. If
he's
you
still
could
alive.
shoot somebody, and he's still, and if you could shoot somebody in the face and that man gives a press conference apologizing to you, I'm just like,
with the wounds.
With the wounds.
He has a scar on his face now, like his little pepper spray. Yeah, I'm sorry I put my face in front of your gun.
I apologize.
Yeah. It shouldn't. My face should have been that normal. Like, not saying it was normal, but I shouldn't have put it so close, whatever. But
and Kamala Harris's buddy, she was happy to get his support. That's right.
Him and his daughter, his very, very, very hate homophobic daughter. But that was one connection. And then the other thing now I'm thinking about, because maybe Dre put this in the chat, but now I'm thinking like, and I want to give a shout out to Red Nation podcast, because they're the ones who Rebecca Nagel and Nick Estes talked about what's actually in the Declaration of Independence, the phrasing of merciless savages on our borders. So that's like from them. So I got reminded of it because of the excellent work they do.
That's why Clinton had to leave that part out.
Well, I'm now
in his
thinking
statement.
the reason why I bring it up, I agree, but I actually think now maybe it's connected to the fact that I actually do think there would be another timeline where they would be able to like do an acknowledgement of certain things and say we're working towards a pure union, pun intended, because they're very white and rich. But I do think now I'm thinking about it, it could be related to Hillary going all in for Israel, because that really reveals this very real, sustainable contradiction. Because I want, because I'm struck by that. I honestly feel like if there was an Obama 3.0, like a Hillary third term or a fourth or whatever, God forbid, I do think there would be somewhat of a push to say we failed in our treaties, but we're working. I can see still that being written in, but it seems to me with Israel, I don't know, like the talking around. The talking about native disposition has become more of a thornier thing because it's literally happening. And Hillary Clinton has been on stage multiple times talking about how young people are just being, attacked with propaganda about Palestinians' human, livelihoods. And I'm sure with her and Bill, it's a marriage of convenience. I'm sure that she's telling him and warning him, listen, if you put a statement out, you should, but also try not to do too much with it, because she's obviously, I definitely believe, even if she's never going to run again, she wants to be a power broker in the Democratic Party. So that's something I don't know why that struck me so much. I do feel like that is a real big omission that I don't think would have existed even like 7-8 years ago or whenever Obama was around.
No qualms from me on that. That makes sense to me. So I appreciate the indulgence. It just struck me as additionally irritating. I'm in a bad mood. I'm not watching, at least not yet. I admit, I don't know if I'm going to make it all the way through, but I admit I'm not watching the World Cup, but all the results yesterday pissed me off. I did see all the results. So
the game
all the colonizers,
too.
Yeah, all the colonizers, and then the Great White Hope scores 2 goals to put Brazil out, and that just sent me. I just thought I was gonna just become apoplectic, and then of course the United States, in a very corrupt, gets a player a red card overturned and gets their top goal scorer back for the game later
when
today.
When there's no appeal process.
There's no appeal process
structurally. There's none of that.
So in case people are not, U.S. player gets a red card the other day. Trump literally calls Infantino and says do something, and and all of a sudden FIFA rescinds the red card. And there's literally no appeals process. So you're not even as some were saying that he shouldn't have gotten a red card in the first place.
Right.
At this point, it's irrelevant because there's no process. It's been decided and that's it. And now they get their player back when the dude from Qatar who did something far less egregious got a 5-game ban.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, never mind how they treated Iran. Like this is
sickening. This
is so. And then on top of it, the colonizers keep winning, and I'm like, this is
Egypt's in though.
Egypt's still there, but look, man, we have some uncomfortable, I don't know, for me, some uncomfortable discussions to have about that too, because I don't know. I always struggle. I always struggle with the quote unquote North African versus the sub-Saharan.
I see. Yeah.
Struggles and histories, but no, Egypt is still there, and I just yesterday was just so then I think that I don't know why. Maybe that's why I lost sleep. I don't know. That I woke up grumpy and tired. So, but we got the vibe ban. We got the criticism of the presidents. So, and yeah, this is also a fact. Egypt is horrible on Palestine. So now Mohammed Salah has over the, if I'm not mistaken, their main players over the last couple of years said a number of good things, but
and the coach recently. So he came out and he actually took out a flag on the pitch
really?
after the game was over, and then he talked about how it's their heart, it's their people. He's been very, very
Wow.
forward. He actually got
He
harassed.
took a Palestinian flag out on the pitch during the World Cup?
Yep, right after winning.
Oh, wow.
So that's the only reason. I totally agree with you, because Morocco, for example, Morocco is the best African team. But I don't like them because the government is always, again, punks for other people, for Western powers, and also they're occupying Western Sahara. But the country's players, for the most part, their fan bases are very pro-Palestine. So that's the difference for me. But Egypt is just a little bit better, just because the coach is very, very forward, or has been. He got harassed recently at some airport again after these comments. So I think they're connected. So, but to your point, I've honestly, I'm a bad leftist. I've watched almost a lot
I'm
of
not
the
judging.
games.
I just
No, you can judge.
Yeah.
I don't like. I totally get it, but I'm just saying I have not really watched. But I haven't. But the one with the Norway guy, that guy, I call him the man with the rubbery face, Holland. So because and I don't like how they're trying to make a moment with that stupid rowing thing that they do. They're trying to make it to their own New Zealand Maori thing, like with the drumming. So it's very obvious to me what they're trying to replicate. Because yesterday when they won, which was super aggravating, and the Brazil team did deserve to lose because they did not play well. It was aggravating because all the cameras and people were like, well, let's go back to the pitch. Let's go back to the field when they're doing the drumming. And I'm just sitting there with my partner and we're watching it. She thinks she has a creepy face.
So the Norwegians are doing drumming?
Yeah, like a Viking, boom, boom, whatever that is. So they do the rowing thing, which is, whatever. But I don't like Holland because I found out, I think if it's accurate enough, that he did call one of the, like a former Israeli hostage of the Hamas or whatever. So he called them personally, I think. And
really?
I don't know. You know how internet is. I'm also at that age where things fool me because I'm also very hopeful, but or not pessimistic. But I think that's what one of the issues was.
So again, I've admitted I have a very childish response to him. Well, at least in underdeveloped one. Because my initial reaction to him is that I'm not denying his talent and whatever, but the way he's talked about and the way the fans react to him upsets me. And it is very much the great white hope and their champion. And I just feel that that's what they're saying every time I watch the coverage and the fans reacting to him and the cheering. It's why I can't watch, I definitely can't watch US. Like I can't, because when they do well and the fans, the happiness of the fans gives off, it reminds me again when Malcolm X said what he said, in the rest of the world, in the Muslim world, a white man's, his point was that the white is just a descriptor. But in the United States, the white man said, when he says white man, he means boss. And so it's like when I see whites cheering with the flags and the paint and I'm hearing them say, in my mind, I'm hearing them say, when they're chanting USA, I'm hearing, something like, white is right, or, white power or something like that. So anyway, and I just did a quick Google and it does seem like there is that he did
call.
Oh wait, okay. So the Express Tribune says fact check: viral video does not show footballer congratulating Israeli soldier on killing Palestinians.
No, that's not. I think he was.
So that's not the one you're talking about.
No. I think he just talked to a former hostage. But the question is, like, he never will never.
In April of 2025, soccer star. Let me just show this, just
Holland.
so that we're. So it says here, soccer star Holland. The Times of Israel reports the soccer star Holland calls freed hostage and mega fan Omer Shem Tov. He called the former captive and thanks him for an amazing gesture, or he was thanked. The former captive, right? I guess thanked him for held a video call with released Israeli hostage Tov on Wednesday.
I wonder how many. I'm sure he's called a lot of Palestinians.
Well, they're just. Why would he do that? Because Tov was freed by Palestinian terrorists. Right. So they report here the Palestinian terrorists. So why would he call them? Yeah. So
that's
okay.
the one I meant. Yeah.
So I was hating him for just more silly reasons. But now. I mean,
it's still real because I think even without that, I was really annoyed by him because I knew he was good, but the way they lift him up and the way they all went back to the pitch to see that stupid ceremony, I always kept wondering, like, because there are things that my partner sees on TikTok, like in Boston, they were really loving the Scottish friends, for their drinking and for like putting little like funny hats on their statues, and all she said, and I agreed, was like, can you imagine if it was anybody else doing that? In Boston of all places, they would just be like, there's vandalism, or this is just not what a city should be, these outsiders. And here they're just having a fun time with Scotland, and Scotland is not like say bad or anything. They actually push back, but still it's annoying. And then with Norway, it's very evident. I think I saw on Twitter or X or whatever, a lot of right-wing whites, really loving the team anyway. And Holland is just, I do think he's good, but I also am just like, I just don't like his face and how smug he is and just everything.
I just admit I don't care how good he is, and yeah. I'm rejecting the inspiration he seems to be giving to the broader pan-European world, and So as has been said,
but this particular situation, out of many situations that I didn't hate, I'm gonna have to hate until further notice.
Oh my God! And real quick, amazing. I've been deficient in this, I admit, in terms, to the extent that I'm supposed to be more journalistic in what we do here. I've been deficient in looking into in being involved in and covering the data center issues, which is popping off big here in Maryland. And the point that is being made here that in Henrico County, Virginia, they're telling teachers to limit their electricity usage in classrooms while having tons of data centers. Unfortunately, that makes sense because the data centers and the AI are going to be replacing the teachers in the schools anyway. So everybody's like Khalees has been promoting in Kenya and other people all around the world. Their AI is going to teach their kids at home. So what do we need teachers? It's incredible. I love Rhonda. So unfortunately, but yeah, I'm aware that this stuff is going on. I just haven't been focused on it as much as I probably should. So salute to those that I do know in PG County here in Maryland and elsewhere who are holding up that fight. And salute to those in Virginia, because that's crazy. I mean, that's and does that mean that they're reducing air conditioning too? Like, is that going on? Is this like a summer school thing too? Like, that would be.
Jared, give me one moment. It's
I mispronounced the city. My bad. I hate Virginia, so I don't give a shit about Virginia. They arrested me.
I'll be back in just a minute. I just want to make sure there's nothing close to the windows because it's really, really pouring. I'll be right back.
Yeah. All right, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No. Safety first here. We safety first here. So while Sudip secures his home, please everybody like, share, subscribe. Check the show description for the link to the full playlist to our Donut King project. And we are going to be talking about it when Sudip gets back. This book here, Bitter Fruit, The Politics of Black Korean Conflict in New York City by Claire Jean Kim. Published in 2000 on Yale University Press. All right, Sudip is back. So let me just set you up with this. So first of all, I will, let me, again, incomplete in the homework. I didn't read every page of the book. and I focused mostly, I did my intro, outro thing, and then I focused intermittently throughout the book, but I focused mostly on the chapter on the Red Apple boycott, chapter 4. And I want to say, and I think part of why I needed the uplift of the vibe band this morning is that on July 4th, I've often confessed to not having finished the homework. So all I can say is at least I'm honest. But on the 4th, I restreamed the Great Harlem Debate. Is Barack Obama good for black people? And so there's some interesting overlap, because first of all, one of the people that spoke is now the late Viola Plummer, who was one of the activists with the December 12th movement, who was featured heavily in chapter 4. And this is sort of the point that I wanted to use as a segue to invite you to introduce and discuss your discussion of the book. But it was a little bit depressing to go back almost 20 years and listen to people in this great debate making arguments, including, unfortunately, Plummer's with which I don't agree, but also whether I agree is ultimately irrelevant to the broader point of my depression, is that these arguments are still happening with very little change in the material conditions and lived experiences, and little change in the elevation and quality of the arguments, as far as I'm aware. So when I went back, when I went to read Bitter Fruit, and I'm literally seeing Plummer's organization referenced from 20 years before that. Or really 30 years before that, going back to the early 70s in some cases with the December 12th movement that's talked about in the book, but 20 years or so with the boycott in the early 90s. Within there making references to earlier conflicts between Black and Asian communities, and the resurgence of a Black Power movement with the killing of Yusef Hawkins, which was, for me and my youth development, was a huge moment. And I'm sitting there, so I'm reading this and I'm saying, man, nobody has picked up this book and studied it, apparently, and built around, and I shouldn't say it that way, obviously, but this is what I was feeling, and built around the arguments being made here and being demonstrated in terms of what the communities were saying.
Right.
Oh, I hear the thunder, man. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. It's perfect. It's ominous for this discussion.
The timing was good, yeah.
And then, where she ends with the book, with the reflections in her classroom on the LA uprisings from the perspective of Korean women shop owners. I was like, man, no wonder we started this project, because the madness we're responding to is the result of none of these issues being properly addressed. And the line that I took from chapter 4 that I'll end my ramble here with is that, as I took a subtle critique of the December 12th movement, was that when they were engaged in the Red Apple boycott, they did not put socialism on the table. And they shelved that part of their expressed stated politics as revolutionary nationalists for a preferred engagement around Black nationalism or race first politics, absent class analysis, which seems, as I'm to have aided in the confusion to this day around why we still see so many people saying Black people should just boycott the Asians and do our own thing and we'll be good. And it's like, that wouldn't solve everything either. But anyway, let me stop there. Go ahead. Go ahead and say talk about the book and let's go. But that was where I'm starting with, or how I
Yeah.
Hold
on. Yeah, it's gonna get loud. It's really, but
it's all right.
The reason why I was drawn to the book, so I use this book as a real cornerstone or foundational element to my own writing style and work, because it's qualitative interviews, so just interviews, just for anyone who's listening. So Claire Jean Kim is a political scientist, I believe, by training. She now, because we did the other book that she wrote, which is the Being Asian in an Anti-Black World, but I think she teaches more so now in the ethnic studies department, which tells you a lot about political science. That's how I feel too. But the reason why I first of all really appreciate the book is because first of all, it focuses on the 1990 Red Apple boycott of 2 Korean-owned stores in Brooklyn, a boycott that was led by African Americans and then Haitian folks, which they led together, like you kind of mentioned. The boycott took like a big chunk of the Dinkins. So this is also during the Mayor David Dinkins era, just as he got elected. And this obviously had to do with Korean owners being extremely disrespectful and racist to Haitians, first of all, and to other Black folks. And what's good about the book in my mind is that it talks about this one year of boycotting, but it extrapolates a lot of meaning from it in terms of how racial power works. But it also does a lot to give background on it. So before even she gets to the chapter 3 or 4, she goes through discussing racial ordering, which is again expanding a little bit on what we also just talked about in her racial triangulation piece. It's in this book. Then she talks about, I think one of the most fascinating parts of this book is actually her discussion of Black nationalism too. So she talks about Black nationalism. She talks about the lead up to the December 12th movement, which, becomes a major part of this movement to get the 2 Korean shops to shut down because of how they treated Haitian customers and others. And she also, she does that. And then she breaks down the Red Apple boycott, which now she pieces together Korean American responses. And then finally she goes into a media analysis, which I found really good too. So she covers the whole thing. But the reason why I initially was so drawn to it is because it's qualitative, it's interview style. So she interviewed, I think, maybe 60 plus people from both sides of the conflict, actually. But the other thing I wanted to say about my own triggering response, because I was born in 88, and then born and raised in Queens. And obviously I wasn't around when Yusuf Hawkins was murdered or Michael Griffith was murdered. But growing up in the 90s, I don't know how to explain because I was still really young. I just had a sense of certain people to trust or not trust based on how my grandfather and my parents would watch the news. And so Dinkins, obviously, I was not really sentient to understand Dinkins, right? But they voted for him. I remember this because they hated Giuliani, which is another part we should get into. But the other thing that also was triggering for me and frustrating, because I read this book for a third time, and I always keep forgetting some of the things in the middle. Oh, shoot. Oh, man. Okay.
Wow.
Dang. Yeah. So
I mean, okay. Let me know if this I was just trying to show Dinkins. So
yeah.
Let me know if this becomes okay. Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. One time we had a charger.
Oh yeah. Okay. We had we had our version of that the other night. Yeah.
So no, I get it. So I'll tell you, but the thing that was so also unnerving to me was Ed Koch and the talking about quote unquote white ethnic politics and how he also maneuvered anti-Semitism. I'm using the term he used to cover his racist butt so many times. And I knew growing up, because by that point in the 90s, he was obviously not mayor anymore, but he obviously pretty much Giuliani, even though he's a Democrat, is his hair. But reading this and rereading this and reading how he also weaponized certain talking points and how Dinkins barely made it through in the general, because he had won the Democratic primary really close with Koch, And then, of course, it's a very quote unquote, New York City is a very quote unquote Democrat city, which is sometimes meaningless. And it proved that case because, again, he squeaked by with Giuliani. That was the first time Giuliani ran was when Dinkins was running as the Democrat candidate in the late 80s. But what I love about this book is she does a lot of this through actual interviewing of both sides and the Korean and African American side. She doesn't interview any of the white people, but she does that, which is fair. But she does insert, I would argue, objective analysis, though. So she doesn't sit by the sideline either and just say, hey, I talked to the African Americans and Haitians who are saying this, and I talked to Koreans, you would be the judge. She literally studies also how the Korean newspapers, which she makes the connection to the South Korean state, how the Korean newspapers were shaping Korean American identity at that time as well, and how invested they were with the Merchants Association. Like, everything is a power analysis. Everything is a materialist analysis, which I greatly appreciate. So it's a great book, and it's not totally inaccessible because of the interview style, which I appreciate. So yeah, I love this book, and it's like really, those are the hits for me that she leads with. Before we even get into the Red Apple boycott, she has this fascinating, really big chapter on the local Black nationalist resurgence. And I do want to say what you said earlier too, about the fact that they didn't quite talk enough about socialism. But it's interesting because obviously the people in the coalition, she mentions three parts to the Pan-African coalition here. She mentions those who are maybe cultural nationalists in some way, who are very much about Black owned, Black power in that narrow way. But she does interview people who are revolutionary nationalists, and she talks about how they're directly identifying with the Black Panther Party. Yeah. And so she does mention him. I think Roger Wareham was interviewed a few times. So they're there. So I found that very interesting. How I just love the fact that she just didn't leap into the boycott, and she gave the due deference, really required to understand even the so-called African American side or Black side of the issue. And also, again, just reaffirming how, yeah, you know what, even the idea of Blackness is a very coalitional thing, because she was also harping on at this point how Haitians are now through this boycott. If there's any positive from that boycott, was how they were brought into the fold of being part of African American movement culture, because now they were trying to bridge this divide, saying, hey, you're Haitian, you're Caribbean, but you're also getting effed over by these Korean shop owners. We'll look out for you. And them also having their own interesting adjustments to how they want to be appreciated. But I also like how she referenced how for Haitians, they come to the United States with this obviously amazing legacy of viewing themselves as being Black and being empowered. And once they land in the United States, they're disempowered, and they learn a new idea of Blackness, which I forgot that part when I reread. I was like, that's such a important, interesting point, again, about the Haitian people and their history. Like, they grew up knowing that if there's an issue with Haiti, it's the Duvaliers and it's the people in power who misuse it, but it's not our Blackness. We know it represents this thing that we had appropriated from the French and used to great benefit, this aligning unity situation. So I really love this book, because the media analysis, I know we'll get into. I thought it was really. But
that's also important, because as I was reading that as well, and they quote. So she interviews a lot of the people that some I've met in a little bit, but I mostly have just known just indirectly as people who I learned a lot from, and at a distance, in some cases paid attention to, in other cases have been in the same room with. I've been in had the fortune of like, I've been in one or another meeting with Wareham, and was at the debate where Viola Plummer was there. Alomde Brath. I mean, I've never had the pleasure of meeting him directly, but I have listened. I listened to his Patrice Lumumba Coalition tapes. Oh my goodness, hundreds of hours of Sonny Carson. Grew up on. I watched the movie about his life. What was the movie about his life? No, it's not flexing or name dropping. It's I'm just situating my age, really, and just trying to honor what I thought was just some of the roles that these folks played. James Small, coming out of Africana studies. I think he dips into a little bit of the buying power mythology here and there every once in a while, but someone I've had the pleasure of meeting and learning. I'm reading all this and Omawale Clay, someone else's that I've he still writes with the Amsterdam News if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, it was just wild to and I was connecting it again to the great debate, the Harlem debate, like all these names and people like I don't know, maybe just feeling my age a little bit, but what Smalls actually says, what Small, I keep saying Smalls, what James Small actually says at one point in his interview is he laments a little bit about the ability to communicate the Black American wing of the struggle to elements of the diaspora, and is pointing to a problem that, as I'm reading it today, is still worsening. That is the dissolution of a Pan-African understanding, and a radical one at that, where immigrant groups, elements, particularly from the African diaspora, are not able to be reached and communicated to and taught the Black American experience and history in a way that helps overcome what is also discussed in the Korean context of an anti-Blackness that is instilled before people even get here, which is an issue even within the African diaspora. So all of this is so as I'm reading that chapter in particular, and they're talking about the December 12th movement taking over the boycott and then trying to instill this revolutionary nationalist minus the socialist approach, they're having to struggle against more conservative elements of the civil rights community and the class element and the diaspora and all of these and imposed divisions that again I think are only worsening today, unfortunately. And so it was a little bit, I admit I was a little bit like, man, this is like we haven't advanced from any of these issues, like all of the anyway. But one more piece that I wanted to, in terms of praising Kim's work, because the other part in terms of the qualitative nature of it is that she even goes down to breaking down by percentage as best one could the various population groups, like, and then she said that if I saw correctly, that across the diaspora, Black, Caribbean, Haitian, etc., everyone had a basically same percentage of only about 25% who actually supported the boycott. If I might have to go back and look at that, but I think she was essentially saying that everybody was supporting it or not to basically the same extent, which I also just thought was interesting. But it was that. But I appreciated that level of research too that she had in it. Yeah,
I was very fascinated to. Not to this sounds not to say I was like thinking in my head, oh, Jared's really old, so he should know all these people. But I not to say, but I did just based on the other shows and who and on the episode, I didn't get to listen to the whole debate yet, but I just was curious to know, and I had a feeling you obviously would know some of these people just because of location and what you're interested in. But even for someone as me, like a 90s kid, like I said, not as sentient with the Giuliani early years, but later on, I don't know. I was also feeling like I feel like New York politics has kind of the worst aspects of it has just become nationalized, right? With the manner, because one thing I do want to add, she did say that, I believe, about the boycotting issue and how that level of support, but she also went through some data or some news points. She's combed a lot of newspapers, clearly, and archives, trying to detail whether there was a severe loss of revenue. And there still was, actually, for the Korean. The only reason why they made up for it. So when the boycott started, it was the first year of Dinkins' administration. It started off right off the bat when he got inaugurated. And what's interesting about the book, she also rightfully connects Dinkins' world to aspects of the December 12th movement earlier, because they were hoping, they all knew he wasn't a radical. They all admitted to that. But they had been so much fighting against Ed Koch because he's such a piece of shit.
They wanted a black mayor.
Yeah. Which I understand, but I'm just like, I get that, because they also said some people were just, I think they mentioned another black guy before him who was really uncharismatic, and he had like not really done well at all in one of the primaries, or he had sat it out. But they had been looking for someone to come out. But they also, the book did mention inevitably that the boycott revenue was actually happening after a while. Like, people were hurting it. But the thing that was important was the material support the Korean owners got from other Korean Americans and especially other merchants, and from the white population, I'm sure, because there were just straight up donations happening for them.
But she also says that other Korean stores just got more customers.
Yeah. They also
like
got
black
more
folks
customers.
just went to other Korean stores, which I apparently too, which I was like,
but it speaks to the I think for me it speaks to also just how unfairly they were, and not unfairly, how they were purposely targeted and misrepresented for what's the word, for being race, because that was the whole thing, that these Koreans who are supporting these two stores were like, this is an attack on who we are and this is colorblind. But she kept reasserting that these are two stores, they were targeted because the woman pushed this black woman who's Haitian, and then one of the guys ran to the other store for cover.
right.
So they targeted them, and then the other Korean stores, the other Korean stores did not face that kind of havoc. But the reason why I bring that up is because she is harping on this point, like how often the whites, Koreans, and other people, oh, this is just a national weather alert, don't worry, how other people, how is Ed Koch, but I don't even know if he's dead. But the thing is, like, she was just harping on the media germ of it, like how often that kept like, I think it was a really good detail about how, whether you like it or not, and it goes to some of our believers of debate culture, they don't want to hear your side. Don't waste your time. They're not interested. They're not ignorant. They're just racist. Like, they're not like, oh, Jared, I didn't realize they were shopping at other Koreans. They know. They just don't want to deal with anti-blackness from the Korean side or from the white side. They didn't, and also the civil rights stuff. I forgot how wild it is about the core chapter. See, that basically was like saying, well, black people shouldn't be boycotting because they should be, worried about basically working themselves to a better position as the Koreans did. It's like, I was like, I forgot that part.
The reason I am technically a SNCC baby is because it would have been, well, from here, it would have been 50 years before this moment. But because my father, who was in the Cincinnati chapter of CORE at the time, after Roy Innis gives this speech in whatever, 60, whatever, where he basically announces the rightward trajectory, my father and his crew broke with the organization and founded the Cincinnati chapter of SNCC. So he was, old. They were older than the SNCC folks, but they were like, that's a more radical formation. We need to move to that. So to read about CORE saying, yeah, because it's basically respectability politics. It's, saying don't boycott, improve, self-improvement.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it was a reminder, I thought, of well, no wonder that radical folks would have left the organization earlier.
And they had a rally. They had a rally in front of Gracie Mansion when Dinkins was there. And initially Dinkins was not he was not saying I understood it, but he wasn't trying to get embroiled in anything, but he wasn't necessarily going against the boycott yet either. He, in fact, I think the courts had tried to enforce a 50-yard limit on how close you can get to the stores to boycott. And he had said, don't enforce it to the NYPD, because he said rightfully, like, it's a weird thing to do. But then I really was getting we were speaking from the lens of like discourse among black radicals or black liberals, and progressives or whatever. But for me, I was very annoyed as an Asian American being like, just like seeing how they just humiliated Dinkins, and they made a peace rally in front of Gracie Mansion, where he went to speak at finally, because he was feeling now very, very burdened by this on his administration, because this was becoming a huge thing. But the thing that I also want to raise was core people were again there. I think some NAACP people were there, and they did a peace march, and they presented the New York Post, the New York Times, all of them pretty much presented the Black protesters and boycotters as Klan members, and basically described them as being, the new racism, which again, when you're saying about the old is new, that to me, like all of this was just like you pinpoint, obviously for Black folks, that's the same. But I kept thinking about Palestine again. And because, actually in one instance in the book, Dinkins tried to prove, because he was trying to win over white Jewish voters during the primary who were going towards Koch anyway, and the white Catholic vote too. He did not win the white vote as he should have as a Democratic candidate either when he won the Democratic primary. It was very Mamdani-esque in that sense. But the thing that, and also he was a DSA person too, actually. He's actually a Democrat, so whatever. But he actually went out of his way in the book to say, oh, I'm a believer in Jewish folks. I support Israel. So that was also like everything in New York, like growing up in the 90s as a kid, and then looking back in time and growing up again in the 2000s in New Jersey with very similar demographics in a sense. It's just like, it was such a weird nostalgia trip and a reminder of how things weren't, like speaking to Bill Clinton again and connecting it. Nothing is new. Everything was sort of building to this moment we're in. And it was through the New York scene. Like, you can be as racist as you can be to Black folks, apparently, from Koreans and whites, and maybe heck, even other Black folks who are basically saying it's Black people's fault for being pushed in the store. You should just get your own store. But the moment you take on Koreans, suddenly it's like a very protected class of people. So there is a fundamental recognition that racism is there, but not for Black people. And it felt very similar to Palestinians now, where it's like, well, before a Palestinian has to come forward and talk about what they lost like 20 people in their family, they need to let everyone know that every Jewish person in the space or every other person is safe. And it's like, that to me was wild. And I have to tell you, this is like funny, because my dad I love that man, but sometimes his choices in life just makes me more angry, because he would listen to Ed Koch's radio show just to be pissed off about it. I remember being in the car with him, and he'd be like, look at this guy. He's saying all this stupid shit, in his own, and I'm just sitting there trapped. So that's how I knew about Ed Koch, was through this like trauma bonding experience I did not want, where my dad is just like putting the radio on and saying, look at him, he's racist, he's this. And people in New York City know that. Like, that's how I knew about him. That's how I was
introduced to Reagan, who again died during my wedding.
Right.
Because at the time, when he was first elected, I was really too young to fully appreciate the nightmare that he was.
Right.
So it would be that kind of thing, in the car, my mother's listened to the radio, and she was cussing like that. Like, fuck this motherfucker and this bullshit, and he's a piece of shit racist, and and I would be in the car like, well, damn, he must be pretty bad then.
Right.
Like, I remember the night when he won the election. I do have a memory of my mother calling probably her sister and was basically like, it's over. The world is it's a wrap. The country's done. And here we are.
Little did we know.
It can only get worse. Like, yes, my homeboy keeps saying, it can still get worse. He's like, it can always get worse.
But if you think about the 250 years, right, with what Clinton said, we are fumbling and stumbling towards a better future anyway. It's fumbling and stumbling all the way through. Dropping a few bombs on Iranians and dropping a few bombs out of your pocket. Who doesn't have that mistake,
Little slavery here, little genocide there.
Right. But fumbling and stumbling.
And, but I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And when I dropped the bombs on Sudan as a distraction, don't pay me any attention, don't raise any
or
issues,
Yugoslavia too, in a way. Like, yeah, let's just go into Yugoslavia.
They had, that was one of the last things I was doing in the Navy. They had us going up, and again, my story is that I remember I was in the weapons department in the G2 division, and part of my job was to help from time to time push the pallets that would put the bombs on the planes. And then one of these days, these pallets were not bombs, they were flyers. There was paperwork being packed in these. And I asked the supervisor, what is this? And he said, one, you don't read the language, neither do I. And two, because it was written in and he was like, you don't have the clearance. And ultimately what it was propaganda flyers. They were dropping propaganda on saying, so read this so that when we drop the bombs next, you understand why we're doing this for your democracy, for your freedom. As I'm sure what the messages were, something like that. Like the bombs that follow these flyers are meant to bring you peace and freedom. So don't be, no, first of all, I couldn't have kept a copy. I couldn't have, I could not have physically put my hands on any of them. I didn't have the, it's not like I was holding paper and looking at it. I was looking at already closed boxes that I was not able to open. And I was just, but I knew that they weren't bombs. And I was just like, usually we're pushing bombs. And it was like, so what are we doing? And they were like, he was like, I don't know, and you don't know, and we don't have the clearance, so just keep pushing the shit and shut the fuck up is basically what it was. It's like, but yeah, it was the propagandists. It was like, it's good for you.
Well,
and then by the way, Bosnia-Herzegovina is the team the US put out.
Right.
And isn't that part of the aftermath of the Yugoslavia that they destroyed?
Yeah.
Right. So it's anyway, there's a better way of connecting that point. I'm sure somewhere in the chat they'll do it for me, but it's some bullshit is where I'll just rest with it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, the other thing that's interesting, speaking of propaganda, there are glimmers of positivity in what she studied too. Like she did say she did sort of say that for Black folks who are pro boycott of these two stores, they didn't need the white media, nor did they care for it to get their message out. Like she did say at some point, like she mentioned on 69, like radio has certain advantages, and there was the first important, activists frequently appeared on Black radio programs, so there was a lot of like bubbling up energy that way, which I found very revealing in a positive sense.
But she also talks about how they would have to respond to the dominant narratives about all of this being put out by the, I hear you, but there are of course still limitations to that. Where the dominant narrative of the racialization of one community versus the other, the bias towards not only the Koreans but the store owner Koreans, the good, not just regular Koreans, but the ones that own stores and are entrepreneurs, and they're the good people, and the anti-bias again, the antipathy towards Black people just in general, but of course the more radical forms of the boycotting. Now that part for me was probably the most interesting.
Yeah.
Which was the sort of the December 12th wing versus the more moderate local politician and religious leadership wing, where and I really thought Kim did a good job of isolating. Let me see if I can let me get to the part where she isolates the differences and so like on lessons learned on page 111, where she makes the point that we will see that below that the December 12th movement was determined to retain full control over decision making during the course of the Red Apple boycott. To understand the resolve, we need to look briefly at the tropic fruits boycott of 1988. where their agenda was thwarted by more moderate leaders in the Black community, and then she says that, so by the time a couple of years later with the Red Apple boycott, the December 12th movement was much more vigorous in not only organizing itself around its demands and clarifying what it was doing this for, but maintaining control over the boycotts and really wrestling it from a competing coalition group that was more liberal. And that was what I thought was really important to point out, especially as we consider all of these discussions taking place in 2026, that the point that keeps getting left out of the call for boycotts is the pre-organizational work that has to take place to make it meaningful. Right. So the December 12th movement had an organization, they had a clarity around their politics, even if they didn't, focus on all aspects of it during the course of this effort. And their goal was, and I'll find exactly where she writes what it is, but essentially their goals included not only the boycott, but specifically that these Korean shops be shut down, and that this lead to a greater level of political consciousness that would connect the Black community more broadly. So that's why they were more willing to continue the boycott and extend it and keep it going, because they were saying, we're not just doing this for the specifics around this one store or this one incident. We're trying to raise the broader consciousness, and then we want the store shut down. Right. And more moderate leadership was saying, well, we don't want to shut them down. We just want them to go through some sensitivity training and, and there was a part who was, I gotta, because one of there was a specific demand around, so let's see. There was a demand around percentages of profits going to the community.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I need to find that part. But my point is, what was important to me though is that the December 12th movement should at minimum be this standard for how people approach boycotts. That is, having a clarity around a certain politics with goals that go beyond some sort of easily addressed symbolic change, and that's really it for me in terms of that example. But I do want to anyway.
No, I meant with the glimmers of light, because I do think there's a lot of like interesting thing, like to say, because you said earlier we're in the same position or worse, but I think what's interesting, I think we're broadly speaking worse, because I don't know, like the December 12th movement to me was at least doing the pre-planning, like you talked about, to build the coalition, to get their talking points at least on the same page. And even when Sonny Carson was being, seen as this sort of like, difficult person, they shielded him, they protected him. And the revolution, the Marxist ones, like they were talking to Claire Jean Kim very openly about how they viewed this, like you said, as a step towards a higher consciousness. But that was also shared with everybody in that coalition. And again, to its credit, it took a lot of, honestly, the December 12th boycott survived a while, like at least for over a year, until, and a few months after that. And it took I just want to say, like in the section on manufacturing outrage, which is a, clear nod to not Zinn, who's the guy? Chomsky. Who, I don't confuse the white guys. But she does say, like, it was not just local, like the New York Post rags who were saying messed up things about Black folks. Mm-hmm. It was a whole effort nationally, from ABC News, ABC Nightline, CNN Crossfire, I think, and the New York Times, which is a national paper, where even though they weren't as explicitly quote unquote racist as claiming that Black people were the Klan, but there was one on 194. I think what she did really interesting. She highlights several stories, and she mentions how in one New York Times headline, they do it so surreptitiously and sneakily, like their view. So they didn't have to say like something like the New York Post would have been, and today worse actually would
My
say
bad. What page did you say you were on?
194.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
They were saying like, you know, New York Post was like black people ungrateful, Asians great, or something crazy. But they don't say that. But they say in May 29th, 1990 article, she says the headline reads, "While marchers stress love."
Yeah.
And this is not the protest marchers. These are the Korean marchers and the white marchers and the occasional black marcher who's convinced that black people have no systemic problems. While marchers stress love, boycotts of two stories continue. So what I love about this is that she's also looking at the danger, and frankly, more of a danger from the so-called objective press that turns out to be part of this racial ordering system that she talks about. Because they're out here saying, well, and when you said that about the black folks of some clergy coming out and talking about peace, and I remember that she kept highlighting this one black guy who Fred McRae. It's on the next page, and so some tabloid headlines expressed overt bias. So she of course talks about that, but it's interesting because they're still finding black people to be the vehicle for so-called peace and love or anti-boycott energy. So they find a guy named Fred McRae, and the New York Post literally says hero teacher because he's a black teacher who leads students, which I found extremely
led
weird.
50 students across the picket line,
right,
and vowed to continue to speak out against racism.
And then when you think about it, she mentions how there was a criminal record that he has, and he even said, "Go for it, take it on." And then the New York Post being like, "Hero say." So again, I thought that was so interesting too about how typically when a black person is like found out to have smoked weed at 15 and they're murdered at 29.
That's why Trayvon deserved
exactly.
to be killed, because he smoked weed and
one time,
and
twice,
skipped
third.
school.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? That's
But it's all about politics too. It's race and politics. Because this man, they elevate, and it brought to mind. I know I keep talking about Palestine, but who doesn't? Because it's so important. But it is like a more of a fancier term, but like the lumpen element. Like I am very, very cautious with also romanticizing hard experiences that certain people might have, that people might argue, because like Orisami Burton's book Tip of the Spear, the value wasn't just inmates being inmates. He was obviously arguing that within, like, there were actual political prisoners who were framed and sent in who didn't do the job of organizing. It's always organizing. So the Fred McRae type to me represented like what happened in Gaza with all those Israeli backed gangs that were going around and taking over after the genocide and being like, look, we're the anti-Hamas resistance. You remember that? Like,
right.
They were but it just reminds me, like, everything she was talking about was very had so many interesting nuggets of class division and how things can be so quickly turned on its head, like lived experience. Like all of a sudden he's a hero. The New York Post is saying good for him. He's fighting back against these smears and all
bringing
that
racial harmony and color blindness.
But it also thinks of you as opportunists are out there, because I'm pretty sure Fred McRae, because no teacher in their right mind, whether they're pro or against, would just be like, we're just going to do this and take 50 kids to do a boycott of their own people's mission. It's like, so all of that was also interesting. Like, and also I know Al Sharpton is mentioned. She interviewed him.
I was going to get to that. She interviewed Sharpton, and thankfully it was short, and thankfully he had very little to say, other than for taking credit by saying some of his people were early on involved in the boycott before essentially December 12th took it over, if I remember correctly. But real quick, before I come back to that, I just wanted to clarify, say a little bit more about this point about the approach to the boycotts that I really appreciate Kim bringing out. That so I'm on 110. She says Although the December 12th movement advocated a few proximate goals related to the incident, such as merchant apology, the conviction of Korean merchants involved in the alleged beating, and the closing of the 2 Korean-owned stores, their long-term goal was to politicize, educate, and mobilize the Black community around the issue of Black disempowerment. The boycott was thus an oppositional campaign intended to arouse Black collective action against a racially oppressive system, rather than a strategy to wrest goodies such as small business startup loans from the state. And I was absolutely.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Like that, you know. So then on the next, on 112, where she's saying that they took up, again, they're pointing to a history of this being discussed, even pointing to the plan similar to what was suggested by Carmichael and Hamilton in Black Power, the Politics of Liberation in 1967, where the goal was, let's see, let me just back up here for with one of the coalition groups that formed. And I don't think this is before the December 12th movement, or is this the December 12th movement saying this? Now I've lost. The point I'm getting at is that on 112, where she talks about the 4-point settlement that was reached with the tropic fruits boycott of 1988, that. So this is okay. So this is why the part of this was what the December 12th movement was wanting to prevent from happening again. That is if I have it right, because the 4-point settlement plan that came after that tropic fruits boycott, which predates the red apple boycott by about 2 years or less, reached a 4-point settlement plan dated December 21st, 1988, stipulated that Korean merchants in the area would, 1, transfer their accounts to local Black-owned banks. So are they saying that this happened?
That was a plan. Like, they agreed upon it.
They agreed upon it. And then the second was that there would be a contribution to the Bedford-Stuyvesant Community Trust Fund for Economic Development. The third was that they would hire and train Black youths from the area. And 4, take ethnic sensitivity courses. It also called on the store owner in question to publicly apologize to the 2 women shoppers. It is interesting to note that this agreement mirrored almost exactly the community rebate plan proposed by Carmichael and Hamilton. And now, the reason I made a note of this is that if I remember correctly, in Black Power, Hamilton and Carmichael were making the argument that, as I remember it, and I should go back and look at this, that their argument was similar to what Kwame Ture would be saying later in life, like focus less on the race or ethnicity of the owner and more on the outcomes generated by the exchange. So like when he would say, if white folks own all the property, then elect yourself to office and raise the property taxes, and then Black people could live for free off of the elevated property taxes that whites are paying since they own all the property. Now I get this comedy in that, but as I understood him then, he's there. The point is, it's not enough to have a Black owner of a store if the wealth from that store is not distributed, if all it's going to do is produce a class division, et cetera, and so forth. So that's why in the next paragraph she writes that although the December 12th movement resolved not to repeat the mistakes of the tropic fruits boycott, the 1988 event foreshadowed the red apple boycott in an important way. It indicated that Black elected officials, no matter how progressive, had different imperatives than radical Black activists.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just all I can. That's why, and I admit, like I'm confessing here, like a little bit, like I'm, look, man, my kids are growing up and leaving the house. I'm depressed about that. I'm depressed about what happened at the World Cup this weekend. I'm depressed about, the incomplete struggle being reminded of, going back to the Great Harlem Debate. So when I'm reading this through a depressed lens, Sudip, of these are the same goddamn in 2026, all these little videos we've been looking at, and they're all saying a version of the same thing. And it's like, and then I'm sitting there saying, but she already, and I've never read this book, and she already did all this work.
Yeah.
And as I'm reading it, it's saying we need to do something wildly different. Because I admit I don't like, I do have to admit I don't like the ending.
Yeah.
I don't like how she ends. I don't like, and this is this is the one more confession that I wrote here at the end. I had to write that when she ends talking about using a film in her classroom that highlights the perspective of Korean immigrant women devastated by the Los Angeles Rebellion of 1992. And then she has to ask her students, what are the other silenced voices that we should listen for? Should we watch a companion film about Black perspectives on Black Korean conflict? If we had to create one, what would it look like? And I admit I was retreating into my own nationalisms, and I was saying, so wait a minute, in a class on where this conflict comes up, you're only showing the opinions of Korean or Korean immigrant women, and then you have to ask, what would a film that involves Black perspectives look like? Like, you can't either find one or read some stuff, or like that really bothered me. And I was like, and then because at the end of the book, then she, by the way, makes another huge error, I think, at the end of the book, because she does something that equally I'm equally irritated by. She says, one of the last lines, she says, writing in 1903, Du Bois declared the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. And then I wrote in my note here, she denies his socialism too. So previously she talked about the December 12th movement leaving socialism, which is their own expressed politics, off the table during the boycott. Then she comes back and quotes Du Bois in what is, to me at this point, an irritating reduction of him to this color line from something he wrote in 1903, avoiding everything he wrote for the next 60 years, including his condemnation of capitalism, cooperatives, etc., and even citizenship in this country, and leaving. So my point is, if you're going to use him to inspire your readers into some level of other thought about these issues, because she's saying at the end of the book, I really don't have an answer. I just, I just want to point you in the direction. Here's some Derek Bell. Here's Du Bois. Right. Then don't leave out his socialism. Right. And then don't leave out the Black perspectives that you do so well to document in the history of the Red Apple boycott. But then the LA rebellion happens in 92, and we're only anyway. I just admit I was just irritated by that. So I understand the no socialism and the no Black folks at the end of the book was like in the last couple pages, right? And I'm doing too much with that, but that's how I read it. So that, but I admit I'm admitting my mood here. I was anyway, that's it. That's it.
No, I just want to say that I do think, though, I totally get that, because I also had a little bit of a similar feeling when she mentioned the film. My impression was she's basically trying to say that some of these Asian kids themselves still have this really epic blind spot as to like who should be in the center of these stories. But I'm not defending that. But I think she does. But I do think she brought up this. It just goes to show how people, ironically, with Du Bois too, how they change. Because I think she brought up that film in the anti-Black book we read by her, and I think she actually dug into it more. So I think there is maybe a progression part for her thinking, because I think that film was brought up. Yeah. So I'm not like. But the other thing I just want to say about her work is, I think it's also interesting how this book is considered to be well, at least as far as I can tell, like a real classic in the field of political science and ethnic studies within it. But in my opinion, you won't find as many books like this. Like there are books that deal very, very heavily with people of color, like mine, hopefully, which is, you know, my dissertation coming out. And I write like this, like I quote Du Bois, I quote that annoying line, unfortunately, that's going to get you angry. But I do also quote, I also do quote all the other stuff. And I do mention how he's a socialist and a Marxist and a Leninist and all that kind of stuff. And Claudia Jones and all that. But I do want to say that I think in the field also, in terms of what you mentioned about not having read the book, I obviously never read the book until I got into a PhD program. But I think the field still, like, books like this are still kind of missing to me, because the story about Korean and Black conflict, I say conflict, is also a story about a lot of multitude of just general American issues. And I think with the Korean side of things, I think what's important is to, because I don't know, I'm explaining this, but all I'm saying is in political science is not good at this, mainstream political science. This book still stands out to me. What I did agree with you on, I mean, I agree with you 90% of the time, but the one thing that I also did agree on is the socialism part. Because I understand she's not trying to suggest anything, but I do think that there is this presentation in the book implied that the story should have been having more Black businesses. And I think that even though the movement is trying to conceptualize it further, and I would have loved to have seen a part 2 to this, because I wonder what is the fallout after December 12th. I wonder how the activists and organizers dealt with Dinkins crossing the picket line after 16 months and basically dissolving it. And then Giuliani winning in 2 years, with Roger Ailes, Fox News Roger Ailes, using the protesters as this, very anti-Black thing. It was like, look at what Dinkins did because he's Black and they're Black, and he allowed them to run chaos across the city, even though it's just one part of Brooklyn. So I would have loved the part 2 about December 12th post. I'm always fascinated to know how people pick up the pieces after this boycott happened. And then I would have loved to see more, because I do think she's progressed. Like, if I remember correctly, the second book we read, she's definitely more in the corner of I think one person mentioned a little bit of an Afro-pessimist take, but she's certainly more shifting that direction, in my opinion. The only thing that I also was a little bit wanted more of was just, I would have wanted more from the Dinkins office, maybe. Because I think she does interview a lot of the people on the committee he had. So he had a committee investigate what was going on, which included Koreans who were pro-Dinkin and included Black folks who were pro-Dinkin. I don't know if anyone white, maybe not. But I would have liked to have seen if she, I mean, I know how this works, and I know you know how this is difficult. I'm not suggesting that Dinkins would have talked to her, but I would have wanted to see more of that. Like, just in terms of, because at the end, she brings into the equation the Korean Americans who are not anti-boycott necessarily. They were on the Dinkins side, though. So they weren't pro-boycott either. So I would have wanted to see more of that fleshed out with them, because I do think, like, in one instance, there's a Korean American guy who was actually very annoyed with the Koreans who were standing against the boycott and had said that I'd come here. He's from South Korea, but he basically grew up in the United States with his family. And he said his family members were actually more liberal, which was the anomaly. And he had grown up knowing, like, to what you said, Black history. But then at the end, he still said that the rally, the peace rally, which was really the anti-boycott rally, he found some level of pride in the rally coming together. So I would have liked, and I know I'm actually maybe doing the thing you don't like, because I'm actually centering Asian, but I would have liked to see more of that Asian, like, identity structure, because I was getting quite frustrated with how he slid so easily between Black history is real and this is messed up, what they should listen to them, the Koreans, the Black folks. But then he said he found some kind of, like, pride in Koreans having empowerment, because they don't speak up often. I would have loved to see more of that, because she does mention the generational divide too. She does say that there was a bigger divide emerging between younger folks who had grown up in the States and had some of this education versus the older folks who were, and I don't want to go on a tangent, but she also mentioned how, again, she mentioned the South Korean government's really hands-on influence in shaping some of New York City's Korean American culture. And I would have wanted
That's
maybe
right. Yeah.
another book on that, maybe, because to me that's also fascinating to talk about how all the, because you had mentioned something that I think we've both talked about very much, about how what's the word, like, for example, the one thing I do get annoyed by, which I don't mind though, because it's like the least of my problems, is like when people, even black folks or white folks, they talk about Asians and Asians do this, and with the Rick Chow case, because the one thing that I think is important is the political culture people come from. So with South Korea, it's evident that they're coming from already a conservative culture that was imposed and shaped and, quite frankly, elevated, because these cultures are also organic. There is a South Korean or Korean conservatism, which, unsurprisingly was Japanese colluded, that the American state lifted up. So none of it's organic. Because I'm not trying to give myself like too much praise of my parents. I love my parents to death. I saw them on July 4th. All we did was watch soccer. I loved it that way. That was fine. And my partner was there, and you're telling her all about soccer. So it was fine. I didn't really do much. But what I'm saying is that they also knew about Korean racism against black folks. And in parts of India, it is extremely clear there's a lot of anti-blackness. Like, there's riots have happened. But and now it's changed. The region they're from is now BJP supported, which is disgusting. I want to throw up. But for a long time, I think I mentioned this to you, for a long time, it was communist ruled. And even though it was not perfect, a lot of the Hollywood movies that they would have were movies where I remember one time going up to the rooftop and drinking tea with my aunt, and she would always wake me up early. And she would just wake me up early and we would have tea together. She got really used to it. And then one day she was telling me these things that were kind of still weird, but she basically said to me, African Americans, right? Black people are the most intelligent people in America, right? They have all the positions because they're intelligent. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, they're intelligent, but I was so lost as to the positions part. And then she mentioned how in movies, but she said that in movies, they're always the police captains and the sergeants. So all I'm saying with that small dose, even though it was kind of still confusing, was the media culture part and the diet, the political diet that infuses itself in certain aspects of Asian culture. And I think I would have wanted more of that in another book. And the December 12th thing, because you brought up I was so fascinated rereading them and being like, I really wanted to know more about how they dealt with yet another boycott that was this time not just eaten up but from within, but really from Koreans. Still, as much as I want to say some aren't racist, they all did bandy together. They really did against this boycott.
To Zenzabel's point, why don't we play this real quick? To Zenzabel's point, they are still here. We can maybe reach out. Let me play this short video real quick.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Our organization came together from many activists in this country who were struggling around the denial of Black people's human rights here, against racism here, and against poverty. We've been involved in probably every major struggle that's concerned Black people in this country since the 70s in that regard. And we were very early supporters of the African liberation struggles inside Southern Africa.
And that's Clay Dare, interviewed in the book.
South Africa, Zimbabwe, the former Portuguese colonies, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique. We've tried to participate and be constructive and supportive of not only the liberation of African countries, but also their struggle against neo-colonialism, and also the question of development. We've participated and we have a cooperation agreement with the former Organization of African Unity, currently the African Union, one of the few organizations in the world that has a cooperation agreement directly with the organization. That cooperation agreement deals with education, development, research, and support for crises in Africa. We've participated ongoingly in many of the international conferences that have taken place on the continent, in Addis Ababa at the AU headquarters, and many of the regional conferences. We particularly participated in the World Conference Against Racism. We struggled to make sure that that conference reflected the real interests of African people. We looked at it as Africa's time to say to the world where we were. The United Nations was trying to liquidate the question of racism by saying with the liberation of Southern Africa, racism no longer existed. But of course, we know that that's an untruth. We took almost 400 people to the World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa. And out of that conference, we came back very fired up. And with the declaration that the transatlantic slave trade was in fact a crime against humanity, we then knew that establishing that fact would lay the basis for the criminal activity of European countries against Africans, and therefore laid the basis for reparations. And so coming back from Durban, we organized the first reparations rally in the history of the United States in Washington, D.C. in 2002.
All right, so just a little bit there. I mean, so potentially we could
That's
even
really
reach
cool.
out and
Yeah.
see if we could, do an interview to update us on.
That'd be amazing. I didn't even. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
But yeah, so there's that. But no, I agree with you on the point. The what all immigrant communities get as preconditioning before they get here is, I think, very important. And I'm convinced at this point that almost all of it includes some heavy dose of anti-Blackness. Very few people are encouraged to come here and bond with Black America. And Alombe Brath there's one of his interview quotes in here is, I thought really important. First of all, I have enormous respect for Alombe Brath, and for someone who I never met, but who's I've just listened to him. I had a parasocial relationship before these things existed. I mean, I listened again. When I tell the story of how I used to listen to lecture tapes while delivering pizza, I don't. I don't think I'm sufficiently stating the extent to which this was. I mean, for years that was my full-time job, and that was 8 to 12 hours a shift of just between mixtapes and lecture tapes. It was all I was listening to, and I would and I used to make that run to Cary Street to my Baltimore crew to make that stop for that, that little whoop whoop whoop, and then I would head over to North Avenue to Everyone's Place, my favorite bookstore, and pick up my lecture tapes, books, bean pies, and then head back out here to the tree-lined streets to deliver pizza, and just be listening. And Alombe Brath tapes, because the Patrice Lumumba Coalition hosted so many lectures and events, and then his own interviews. And I mean, so anyway, I'm saying all that to say that he's in here saying, importantly, talking about the December 12th movement taught the Haitian and Caribbean groups about mobilizing, how to organize rallies in the streets, marches. We taught them how to deal with the police to let them know this is exactly what their rights were, and everything else that needed to be done that would help to maintain the longevity of the demonstration. They would not have known the whole story of the economic struggle that Black people had in this country if it was not for us putting those pieces together for them. And I'm thinking about in 2026, to what extent is that work being done, and is it capable of being done, and is it being undermined by this broader digital media environment and the inspired hostilities to that kind of consciousness? So a lot of groups are coming here without being met by organized Black political resistance groups to say, hey, let us bring you in and catch you up on how this thing works here in this country and what it really looks like in this country. So that's where, again, I get these reverse hashtags and reactionary groups with there is this basis of a critique that I do agree with is legit.
Right.
But it's the Alambe brass that used to have the appropriate response.
Right.
Not so let's cut them all off, wave the American flag, and connect ourselves, to the white nationalist state so that we can get an increased reparations package. Like that's why when the December 12th movement was saying we don't want just a couple store owners,
right?
You know what I'm saying? Like boost, like get this, like so yeah, man. I was like, that's why I really appreciate what we're doing. I really appreciate these platforms and the chats because like it is I'm therapeutically.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not it's and then I have to say, because I'm not taking I go against my own advice to the extent that I'm more and more and more disconnected from radical grassroots political organization. I don't have the immediacy anymore of those spaces to go to find some sort of not only analysis and education, but some therapy from all the nonsense. So I definitely appreciate these spaces increasingly just more on that note. But yeah. Oh no, I thought I was hearing something. Forgive me for turning this into a confessional, but
no.
But listen, I don't want to rush or anything, but I want to, I did notice we are at 2 hours already. It didn't even feel like it. But what else would you want to? Because I know you read more than I did, and if there's more that you want to take a time to I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. No, I'm down because I have time, but I did want to just say the positives again about the movement and what they did that I think to what you're saying needs to happen now, and then what they're up against, right? Because I think this book is a great qualitative example of the burgeoning of movements that learned from their mistakes and did actually do a good, like 16 months is a long time to do a boycott in New York City. And again, the way she set it up, what Kim was setting up was not only were they doing a boycott in just any year, they were doing it in 1990 after basically within the 3 terms of Ed Koch, and already Black nationalism of most types being driven to a political marginal position, not in terms of constituency or demographic. It never matches, right? Like the number of people who vote don't really represent the number of people who believe in a thing, right? So Black nationalism was real, but it just was being pushed in a way that they hadn't seen, in a while. And now, Ed Koch, Mr. Reagan, they're all like, I think Koch like invited Reagan to come, like they're all part of that effort. So I just wanted to say, like, she sets it up beautifully, because then you begin to understand how the December 12th movement came together, how they were veterans of the other movements. Like they weren't just, that's the other thing that I like when I tell my students about how, in the negative sense, like how when the Nazis were defeated here and there, and I mean like the Confederates, they don't just like Thanos it. They don't like poof into smoke. They still lived, and they wore different uniforms, and they went about their day, and they were part of NATO, that great organization. So, but on the other side, the people who led the fights, they didn't also go away. Many of them, unfortunately, were taken away. I know I keep harping on this, made into political prisoners, tortured psychologically too in real life. I can't imagine the trauma that you have when you lose entire groups of people you were caring for to the prison complex. For those who did survive, there's a reality. Some people went into drug addiction and other kinds of addiction because of that horrid sadness, which is normal. But for those who did make it, that's who these people were in December 12th. They made it, and they were still doing the work, and they took that knowledge and said, like you were reading from that passage, we don't want the Tropicana thing happening. We know our mistakes now. And what I love about the book too, it does also say like how quickly they cut off Al Sharpton, once the moment, that was amazing. Like she leads with it, and I even said, "Oh no, I don't know. Like I don't like him either." But I was like, "Oh, Jared's gonna like read this part." So then
when I saw his name come up, I said, "Oh,
yes, I know.
Oh shit."
Because they were kind of, but she did the right thing of showing how he was seen as like a come up. But then, of course, when the allegations and the rightful like admittance of working as a snitch, they just cut him off. But that's the thing about their movement, was that they were serious people. They were not.
Yeah.
They were not doing the silly stuff we see. I'm not talking about the boycott Asian thing either. I don't really, like I told you last episode, if they I can give coordinates if they want to figure out what stores they want to go to, because it'll make it easier for me if they put the pressure so I can buy stuff I like in the other stores, like cheap, whatever. So I don't give a shit. Like I don't like these stores either. They represent an attack on everybody in many ways. But it was also like, right now we don't even have that December 12th energy, just because of the repression that happened since then, which I think connects back to the 250 years thing with Bill Clinton. Things haven't improved. They've gotten worse. But the media environment too, like I always reference how, to my students, I reference through Paul Ortiz's work, which is a very his textbook on Afro-Latinx history I always use because it's really great. The fact of the matter is, people growing up now have this feeling that that the diversity we see now in the press was somehow, we're now at the peak of it. We're not. Like for a long time, it was actually better in that, like there were so many black newspapers, like from Pittsburgh to like every corner of New York City. So that was something I also just loved. And then of course, coalitions were created to build Haitian support for this. Like they saw an opportunity, which it was, and they went in and said, you're being effed up by these Korean store owners. We will help you. That's how it should be. Not like waiting organically. So I just wanted to reference again what the book teaches us is like, as much as it teaches about the media landscape pushing down on people and the cunning of the white media structure, liberal and conservative, it also is an interesting book to explain how many hits the movement could take, because it took a lot of hits. It really did. The Korean store owners were getting all the merchant stuff. They were getting the funding that they needed. And again, back to the South Korean government. The South Korean government were definitely invested in making Korean American activism look a certain way. So they were also against a neo-colonial infrastructure themselves.
So, but it also speaks, so that last point again, I forgot to come back to it when you mentioned it earlier. It's such an important point, because one of the arguments that I've been trying to make for years around these comparisons is that so much of the Asian experience in this country, variously Asian experiences, are connected to the governments of their so-called home countries. So that whether it's Chinese immigration laws and relationships with the Chinese government, whether it's, to your point about South Korean cultural influence, trying to again maintain an important relationship geopolitically between the United States and South Korea, and saying, like, so look, when we send you over there, when we support you over there, don't act up. Like it's like don't you dare mess up this more important relationship that we need because of this North Korean issue or whatever, and the communism and all, whatever, and then bringing in the anti-black and Western influenced attitudes and worldviews, all of that. Like, this book does a great job of showing the complexity of the issue, is really the other one of the points I was trying to get at. It's not just as simple as boycott that or yell at them or do this or do that. And then the intricacies within the black, just even the Black American, never mind the African diaspora community, the class, the ideological, the religious. I mean, all of that is touched upon in here, all of which could lead to dozens of other books. And then, yes, she does have to, and I agree that despite my feelings about him politically, if you're going to do this research, especially this qualitative research, you have to not only include Sharpton, but you got to try to interview him. Yeah. You got to. So, but to your point, beautifully on page 94, then In January of 1988, New York Newsday broke the story that Reverend Al Sharpton had occasionally worked as an undercover informant for the FBI. Sharpton subsequently admitted that he had been an informant on cases related to his connections to the boxing world, but vehemently denied that he had ever informed on his colleagues within the movement. Once he admitted to having worked with the FBI in any case, Sharpton became anathema to the December 12th movement. Relations between the preacher and the organization had already been strained, but events surrounding the Day of Outrage held on December 21st, 1987, and then they have a long quote from Roger Wareham explaining why the December 12th quote, "do not want any part of this," that is Sharpton's involvement with the Day of Outrage being planned. We weren't going to get involved in it because causing a spontaneous demonstration in the middle of Bensonhurst is suicidal.
Yes.
Because there's no Black community to which you can retreat. And if folks don't remember, I mean, even me down here, that was on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I saw footage of that famous or infamous march through the white, rabidly racist Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn. As to, you know, and I probably now and then would have agreed with the December 12th point. Like, let me not say the first thing I want to say. If we're going to go into that neighborhood, I would argue it would have to have been done differently.
Yes.
I would not have advocated.
Right.
I just don't, because he says in here, he has a quote in here that has actually governed my own politics for a long. He says something in here about we don't need symbolic arrests.
Yes.
We've been arrested more than enough times. Like I have always refused actually.
Right.
To the extent I've ever been asked or been around it. I've always refused. I will never, if you ever see me in handcuffs, I'm not doing it on purpose. It's not intentional. Please try to get me out immediately, however you see fit.
Right.
Just putting that out there. Like I'm never willfully walking myself into a jail or to handcuffs for any purpose. So I just have never. Well, I've had enough cuffs put on me for real. I'm never going to be like, here, let me make a sign of hell. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So. Anyway, I just appreciate that she included that in there, and salute to December 12th for having that position. I did disagree with the late, great Viola Plumber in her great debate comments around Obama, but, you know, as it relates to, and then lastly, you made this point also, this boycott went on for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's never discussed when people refer to the great boycotts. And I think that that's fascinating. I had not realized how long this thing went on.
Same.
And that there had, you know, and that there had been the Tropic Fruits one just before that.
Right.
So like, and then I went, and one of the reasons I didn't finish the homework is that I went back to this book that I've been hating on for years. This book called The Buying Power: A History of Consumer Activism in America by Lawrence Glickman. And I went back to look for, if I had because I was like, wait a minute, I've intermittently read this book here and there and in sections and gone back to it over the years, and there's no mention of this in there. Like none of so this book that is wanting to present a history of consumer activism, saying how, you know, across race, and you know, it's like a broader. And it, you know, so it's not just about Black, you know, but it's saying there's this history of consumer activism. And I bought it years ago because it says buying power in the title, but it means it's buying into the myth.
Right.
Excuse me. It's saying consumers have this power and have a history of demonstrating. But I'm like, no, they don't.
Right.
And nothing in here suggests that there's been these grand victories. From so like what do we and then you ignore all of this where Kim is now. I know she's more focused on a specific Black Asian or Black Korean and you know, whatever, and this is a more broad history of the United States, but she's doing the real work of showing you why they do and don't work, or to the extent they do and don't work, and what is really involved, as opposed to let me sort of cherry pick examples in history where for brief moments something for a handful of people was maybe wrested from the ruling elite.
Right.
But this is what Bitter Fruit is saying, like it's like the title, like this is bitter. Like this is not, and you can't just and you can't just blindly boycott your way to some grand victories. The other takeaway, like that, I'm you know,
to the thing like you're saying about it makes sense to me now thinking about why, because I read this book now 3 or 4 times, but every time it's been a gap, and I always do forget how long it lasted. So that's one thing, because it's always mentioned, in my view, as like an incident that took down Dinkins. That's how I got introduced to it in a way. But the other thing that's really interesting to me is how these legacies and mythologies around buying power really lifts up small businesses, in a way that smuggles in capitalism in a different direction. So I think one of the videos you shared with me to watch, and I watched the whole thing, was there's this Asian American woman. I think a lot of people in the chat know, I don't know her name, but she's on Instagram and Facebook, and she does side with the boycotters, and she's talking about how Asian folks are anti-black. So she's, someone doing that work, but she herself said something that was quite like, I got really, I just didn't agree with, where she said how she was basically saying that black folks don't have businesses because they were prevented from making businesses the same way Asians do. So that's point correct. But then before that, she had a preamble suggesting that businesses, though, are the lifeblood of a community, and they strengthen the community. That's not true. So Asian Americans structurally are better off than African Americans. There's no denying where we are versus where African Americans on the most part are. Maybe politically, in terms of legislator, just because of demographic difference, there's more African Americans, but it doesn't matter. You still have, Kash Patel, who's really Akash in the FBI, and you also have Asians who are punching above their weight because of their demographic, because of no, it's okay, because of their structural position. So that's true, but that should not then suggest that, because living in New Jersey, I keep saying this, growing up in Queens, I've been around Asian businesses all my life. I've been around South Asian, East Asian, mostly South Asian. I've been around, the uncle, like my friend of mine who's Muslim, we joke about the standard cookie cutter uncle guy with the long beard, Muslim guy just cutting meat. There's always that guy. I've been around that guy forever. I hated it because the meat cutter is loud, the machines. And I've been around Desi folks who own stores who are of different faiths. None of it, other than getting access to like different things you need in the moment, none of it developed anything that was real power. It was all still like, what I'm saying is Asian Americans are better off than African Americans. I'm not suggesting we're equal, because that annoys me when some Asians take it too far. But the other thing that I don't like is the assumption then that somehow that was the secret sauce to some kind of power. And it's not. Small business owners have no fidelity and no reason to share anything with you, Black or Asian. In fact, they'll be more than happy for you to buy their boutiques. They'll be more than happy for you to think it's revolutionary, because they'll think like, like Black-owned business, Asian-owned. Like I said, with the attacks on the women in Atlanta, after that, it was all this Asian-owned stuff. It irritated me, because I was like, what does this have to, none of it's privately owned. So that's a thing that I was very much like, I think has actually gotten worse, because even the Asian Americans who are doing the right thing of speaking up against anti-Blackness and calling out Asians who are against the boycott, they themselves are sometimes smuggling in ideas and mythologies about small businesses overall. And that, I think, is actually different from maybe a few decades ago, when you had still among the African-American side certain kinds of Marxists, and who knew. And it just really quick before you play the video, Roger Wareham kept citing North Korea. So the Korean side, it speaks to the political question and how ideology is not organic or natural forming. The Korean side that was anti-boycott, they kept saying how Koreans have faced the Japanese occupation and they'll face Black people too, which was like, it pissed the fuck out of me. Sorry for curse. I was so disgusted by that. But that's a political thing to what you said. The South Korean government, I'm sure, was like, Great talking point. Do that, because that also buttresses the fact that South Korea is somehow anti-Japanese. It's not. It's a collaborative state. But then on the other side,
and also that Black America is the invading force, as the Japanese once were. I mean, that's
insane. That was actually more annoying than the Klan thing, because the Klan thing I've heard. I've always heard like racist people in New York Post saying like, this is just affirmative action is the same thing as white racism or some shit. But to say you're a Japanese, that's a new low to my, like something new. But the other side, to the credit of December 12th, like Roger, they did mention the flyers, and they did mention North Korea and other, like they were trying to put forward the idea that's not all Asians. They were actually trying to say there's a connection between political culture and culture. So that's all I wanted to say about that too.
No, I agree. I like when Sudip gets indignant. So I don't want to play the whole 20 minutes. Was there? I don't remember the
it's
where
just
and what.
she said.
Just the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, that's all. And she's a great person. I'm not calling her out.
But because the positionality of Asian Americans. Yes, this is really important. Asian Americans were redlined from opening businesses in white neighborhoods because white people didn't want Asian Americans operating in their neighborhoods and didn't want Asian Americans profiting off of white people. But because the positionality of Asian Americans is weaponized to oppress Black people, Asian Americans were being given loans to open businesses in Black communities, even though Black people were not able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. And as I've said before, as a result of this, Black wealth is essentially paid out twice when it goes to Asian American businesses. Once when the individual pays for the goods or services, and then again when the Asian American business owner removes the profit from the community. Because usually people open businesses in their own communities, and this is mutually beneficial, where the business owner is making a livelihood off of providing goods and services to their community. And by being a member of the community, they're contributing and they're investing back into the community. This is an ideal situation, and that is not what happens with Asian American businesses operating in Black communities.
So, but that's right. So with all due respect, that's part of the mythology. So because then we're meant to imagine these Asian communities that are living lavishly off of all the wealth that they're taking from Black communities and others. And we're also supposed to then, as I think you were also pointing out, associate small businesses with the lifeblood and the salvation, as opposed to some small level exploitation ultimately, or producing a bourgeoisie or some slightly elevated business class. It's not the solution that people think it is. And then, but of course, she started with the access to the initial loans and the policy support to set up businesses in these communities in the first place that Black people do not enjoy. Again, to come back and tell people, hey man, just start a business and circulate your dollar and you'll be good, as if that's all it takes, and as if everybody has just done that to their own community's success, is nonsense.
And I didn't mean, and she's like, I've seen her videos and I agree with basically all of them, just because of like, she's very forward about the structural thing, but that's what makes it more insidious in a certain way. Like, not blaming her. I think she's good. I think she's sincere. And I think she's doing the work of doing that. But when she mentioned that, that's exactly what I thought. It was like so many mythologies wrapped into one. She starts off with a really true fact about structural issues, which gives her expertise. But then that makes the problem, because now the person who's the expert, which I would agree with, then lends itself to say something that's also very, very wrong on several levels. Small businesses have no reason. They don't reinvest into the community. They more than likely reinvest into themselves, because like you mentioned, a lot of small businesses are in the red. They really require a lot of work. Really quickly, in some of the interviews that she did of Koreans, hilarious. Like some of the Korean Americans or Korean immigrants themselves, like you said about someone telling on themselves early on the show about what they really think, they told on themselves about what capitalism really is. To your point, a lot of the interviews, they kept saying, well, Black people are racist and they're the Japanese colonizers. And I worked so hard. I worked 16, 17 billion hours a day. I slaved away. It's like, bro, I wrote down completely, that's horrible. Like, what are you talking about? So that is not how any of this work. So whether or not it is, and also now we're talking about 40 years beyond that. Wait, no, 25 years beyond this fact, or wait, 40 years. Sorry, 30 years. Yeah. Anyway, whatever the case may be, you do have Asian chains, H Mart, Patel Cash and Carry, which I always call out. They are also not the small business owner anymore either. They present themselves as small business owner, just like every corporate ad. Like I tell my students, how do the corporate ad market themselves? They don't say like you'll get a faceless person talking to you who will never know. They always make it about the community. There's all these bunch of like Target Vios ads where there's like a guy who comes to your door wearing the Verizon Vios ad. He's like, I'm here to make a soccer party. That is also not what these Asian stores are anymore. They're not the lifeblood of a community. They've been there for a lot. They've reinvested to their expansion.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the Asians are suffering. That's where I get a little bit like, I agree with there, but there's a ceiling to our improvement, right? My parents got nothing out of these stores other than goods and services you pay for. And we're middle class. So and there's a ton of working class Latinos, some Caribbean Black, and a lot of Asians who work in these stores. They got nothing other than being exploited. And that's the thing I just want, because that part annoyed me just because she makes such a good fact. And I've seen her videos everywhere. A lot of friends show it to me.
Yeah.
And she's really popular. So that's when she said that, I was like, wait a minute. They're not the lifeblood of anything. They're actually they're like little Mussolinis themselves. They use family logic, because I think there was a report in New York City that said a lot of the stores are family owned, and they bring families from abroad to work with them. And then they sort of exploit them by saying, oh, you're family, you don't need to get paid. This is an actual thing.
We saw that in the Donut King. That was the whole thing. The documentary shows that. I don't have to pay. He says that. My wife's working basically for free all night long. My kids are working basically for free all day and night long. And then, when I make a little bit of money, I basically, farm out a franchisee to somebody in my community who's desperate.
I was about to say, who's desperate, doesn't know what's going on.
And we'll do the same thing. And then as soon as we make a little bit of money, our kids are like, I'm quitting and going to college. I'm not doing this bullshit. This job sucks.
Right.
Like, who wants to do this? So that's why I keep saying, like, I promise you, if I go to even out here in these street lights, if I go to the corner store down the street, there will be the same 4 or 5 people that I've seen in there for the last 20 years. Like and they're always in there and they're always working. And it's like, even if there was some palace that they lived in from the wealth extracted from this community, when are they ever there to enjoy it? I'm like, it's like, you can't even enjoy it. You're always in here.
I agree with you, but I think I've been to one of these palaces before. I remember growing up in Queens where an uncle of mine worked here, and he worked in a pharmacy, and the guy lived in, I was a child, so I didn't even know where I was being moved to, like driving wise, but I remember leaving Queens to this immaculate place and being like, holy crap, this is a big house. I was a little child. So what I'm saying is, you're right, but I'm saying there are Asians who make it, and they pretend to be of the community because they're like, I'm not a Walmart. I'm saying they're also liars. They are living large, sure. And they are preying on they're preying on mythology. And then to your point, I agree with you. The smaller ones, though, there's more Asian American owned businesses that never reach that level than do. And they're the ones I know you're talking about, which is the ones who are like really to their knuckles, cleaning floors, and then still being assholes to Black people and other brown people, and still being like. So the other thing that's important, like I think the other issue is that when people they weirdly put subjective and objective together. So I've been in conversations where people kind of say like, Asian Americans are racist, therefore this, and I'm saying both. Rick Chow is a racist piece of shit, and his family is racist piece of shit. And what they did is, I hope they'll be haunted for it forever because of what they did. But structurally, the objective thing is that their positionality is still part of the bigger problem where they're forced to work so much. There's no American dream for anyone, but I'm saying both of them are connected. Like, you can have an objective analysis where you're saying small businesses still suck. But then you can also say subjectively, Asian Americans also interpersonally have anti-Blackness. And that's the thing I feel sometimes is missing, because everyone's looking for the good Asian who will say the right thing versus, well, does that matter? I don't think it does. What I'm looking for is good analysis to say small businesses for any community does not work. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. Like I said, with the uncle guy who cuts the meat, we joke about it wherever we go, Islin, Edison, Oldbridge, and we're like, it's always going to be the same uncle with the long gray beard chopping meat. But then again, it is the same uncle who's really old chopping meat. It's him. And why do you think so many Muslim South Asians do that business? Because they know they got that skill. They may have come here for being a doctor, but that was denied. So they're not doing this work and they're just chopping meat. So there's the other thing. Like there's a stereotype, but it speaks to the structural condition. This is how you get by. And it's not a good get by.
Listen to me.
Yeah.
If I'm still just simply teaching classes in 10 years, I'm going to be pissed. The idea that I would in 20 years be cutting meat for 18 hours a day is a freaking nightmare. Yes. So whether I own the store or not, you know, like the idea of that is not at all pleasing to me. So I'm on the, yeah, my whole thing is I just want to keep, we've all produced enough wealth that almost all of us can take massive time and day. Like we should all just be we should just all be chilling is basically what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to get some passive income. So speaking of which, like, share, subscribe. Hey, I promise you, if I get 10 more Patreon members, I'll quit tomorrow. I'm like on the edge. If I get, I'm ready. So yeah, absolutely. But no, go ahead. Yeah.
No, before we wrap up, I did want to cite, I do want to talk about the class thing, because I think last time you mentioned talking about the academic part a little bit, like this positionality. But I also want to reference, there are groups in this book that are mentioned who are doing great work. December 12th, obviously now, I didn't realize that, but there's a group they mentioned called CAAV, CAAV, organizing organizing Asian communities. They're still around, and they also took a very strong position with the Aikai Gurley family against Peter Liang, and they're Chinatown based. So they're real. They've been in for, I know the book took like a position where they also kind of fell a little bit into like, because there was an attack on an Asian person and they were like sort of like saying that's bad, which is fine, but they're actually really good. They've actually also grown and extended so the movement started in the 80s by women, East Asian American women, I believe, and they were attacking anti-Asian violence first, hence the group. But then they actually expanded their analysis to structural state violence against all. Hence, also, they put a lot of analysis forward with capitalism and colonialism. So they're really great. So if people want to follow them, I would recommend CAAV Asian American Communities. And yeah, I just want to shout them out because they were in that book and I forgot that. But yeah, I know we're running like, it's like 2. Yeah. So I don't want to keep you.
No, yeah. but at the same time, if there's something you wanted to make sure we covered that we didn't yet,
I have a lot on my, no, I just love this book a lot. I think what you said exactly is that there's so many books within this book, and yet it doesn't feel cumbersome. Like I do think there are some books that feel dense, like you feel like it's like a fiction novel where things are just running at you and you're like, wait a minute, you didn't even develop this thing. All of it feels developed. Obviously it could be developed more because it's one book, but I forgot, even though I reread this, I forgot how in depth she went into on the side of Black nationalism being in resurgence. And I really enjoyed that history. Like I forgot some of it. I knew about Ed Koch because he's a piece of shit, but I forgot a lot about that work. And I forgot about how this book, to your point, is really also an analysis of the electoral condition and activism condition, or the gulf between, because that was fascinating too, because there's a couple of guys who are not David Dinkins, who are actually to the left of him, who they also did not take a strong position really, because they were now, I think at one point one of them was lecturing through Kim. So these are all direct interviews. These are not things that she pulled from. I just want to let the audience know she did the work of interviewing these people after the fact. And they were telling her how there's a certain silliness, or when you go into serious politics, you got to do this versus the silly politics. And it just Bayard Rustin to my view, like you got to do politics, real politics. And it's like, in the end, what was the real politics? It was more than likely the politics that Dinkins did, and it failed miserably too. He lost the election to Giuliani, which was also, I wrote down next to it, 2016, 2024. I wrote that immediately because he literally lost the thing that he did with crossing the boycott in his, I don't want to be disrespectful, but in his dumb mind, he was basically saying, oh, I'm going to win over the whites and the Koreans. Dude, you lost people who are black and now you're screwed. What got him over the hump the first time against a Republican Rudy Giuliani in a racist ass city, which I love about this book, reminds you New York City is a racist ass city, was the black and Latino vote coming out for him. And he lost that. So I thought that was also such an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like 2020.
And, no, you're right. And this goes back to where we started my point at the beginning of the show, that these liberals promote themselves as the ultimate good, and walk us all backwards to the point where as I and others were predicting when Obama got elected, we're only going to get something worse. This is like people were saying, this is the door is now open. We're now going to see, just like Clinton was trying to narrate with that statement, we're just ever stumbling forward into a better day. And Obama's election was said by many to be a stumbling ever forward. And it's like, no, it's, and that's why also to the point, I appreciate that the focus on December 12th's attempt to be committed to a more solid, strong politics. That I guess ultimately didn't work. I mean, they sustained the boycott for a long period of time, but the results were ultimately insufficient. So the stores were not shut down.
Right. I think they changed ownership, but I think they sold it to like another Korean American instead, who's part of the family or something.
So it's like now we don't know for sure who Rick Chow allegedly sold his store to, but
right, that was what I was thinking.
Yeah. And then to your point, but even whatever the results of this effort were, I appreciate that the history. First of all, I appreciate it being told that, right. And I think that people who today want to hold up boycotts as a solution definitely need to have this has to be studied.
Yes, 100%.
So you and at this point, I would I'm going to make that point to the extent it's relevant going forward. Like if I don't want to hear your argument about boycotts until you can tell me you have an analysis of the Red Apple boycott and what happened there. And I am going to definitely I'm going to follow up. Today, I'm going to reach out to December 12th and see if we can invite
that'd be amazing
in a discussion to say, like, can you update us?
That'd be amazing.
Kim's book,
right?
Because man, too much of this is still happening, and yet the analysis is not evolving. So,
it's not. It's just it. Like, to your point, it got worse politically in every way. It got worse. Like Dinkins, I know it sounds like I have sympathy for him just because I have these like child memories that don't really exist because I was born in '88. But the way my parents talk about him, he just like was a nice old man and he was really nice and all that kind of stuff. And Giuliani's hell, which is true. Giuliani is basically just a fascist who unleashed cops to go do riots everywhere. So he gets what's coming to him in terms of his career, burning. But Dinkins at least had dignity in that sense. But Dinkins is also like, I remember when Obama was getting reelected, some people warned that he could be the Dinkins because they were so worried about him losing. And I was one of them in a way. Like, I didn't say Dinkins, but I was like, I want him to win again because what if he loses? Then it'll be even worse. But he won twice. Not blaming him for everything, but blaming him for a large part of it. And it got worse because what happened in the end, same with Dinkins in a way, was that he basically normalized or not mainstream, but he basically rationalized the system we got. And Obama's still doing that. Like, he doesn't have to say anything that he's saying now, but he knows he needs to for his benefactors, but he also believes in it because he's also an arrogant person. The more I listen to him, the more I realize, because when does he ever speak up anyway politically, other than saying George Washington was a slaveholder but a genius? He always comes out against the progressives within the party who are not even that radical. He went after
and potentially
Warren.
striking ball players. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yep, talking to his best friends and saying, "Yeah, you shouldn't really. It's not a good idea." So, to your point, this book really, I don't know what it is. That I did not time it this way, but reading this book around July 4th, the greatest country on earth's history, and then reading it with Obama's statements, it just was very clear to me. Like, these conversations, like, this book is just, I'm just over the moon about this book because I know it could do certain things better, but it does many things great. And it still is a book that, writing wise, again, deals with so many subjects I don't really hear being talked about in a lot of books that are twice as long. Because again, she talks about Black nationalism, she talks about the boycott, she gives respect to both, and then she also talks about the Dinkins issue. And then, how relevant is it? Unfortunately, I mean, I would love to live in a time where I read this book and think, "Wow, what crazy times, that was." But now I'm just thinking about Obama constantly, because Obama, all he's done is just, fake drinking water in Flint, and now saying things about 250 years of this and that. Like, he'll never, in his mind, he'll never mention Lenin, of course, because Lenin's a killer. But George Washington, a slave, he literally says slaveholder, and he's just also saying, and also on Israel, he never says anything. So the book to me is just, I could go on about it because I know also Claire Jean Kim is like, she won an award for this book. But I also know after this, she wrote another book called Dangerous Crossings, which I did not read, which is about food and race. Because I think it's about Asian Americans and how their food gets targeted and racialized, which I will read. I think that's an interesting book. But she went into that category, and then she came back to this as well with that book we read. I just think people like her are just very interdisciplinary, and I just want to give a lot of shout out to her for doing that kind of work. Because I'll say to you, I don't know how many people in political science, other than the people in my corner of the field, even read this too. Like, it's just because it's also about Asian American identity, because she talked about how Koreans themselves, the first generation, or the ones who arrived here, they kept harping on anti-Korean racism. They weren't saying anti-Asian as much. So I found that very fascinating. They kept referencing the Japanese occupation of them, but they weren't the ones connecting it to the anti-Chinese exclusion acts. This is something she noticed too. She said that they were saying because if you read the quotes from the people on that side of the fence who were telling her, they also kept saying, without any prompting from her, this is an attack on Koreans. So I found this book just like a little bit of a nugget there too about Asian American political construction and how that also needs work, right? Like, it's not just an inevitable thing that you come here and you think you're Asian or something. But again, you know how I feel about that. Like, I don't want people to also say you don't need that term. I think there's a constant dialectics of understanding difference and needing that difference to exist, but then seeking unity, which is what the December 12th movement did with the Haitians.
And that's my point. And that's my point about soda and Pan-Africanism. Right. It's not, Pan-Africanism is not an attempt to erase the specific experiences and particular approaches to cultural practice of various people within the African diaspora. It's if anything, to recognize a common cultural political history, right, and to create a certain important political unity necessary organizationally to go forward. So I've always been baffled when people say, Pan-Africanism encourages some erasure of this or that group or identity. It's like, no, it's, if anything, more appropriately politicizing that identity, which is itself a politicized result in response to European imperialism, which is why I keep coming back to the only reason there is a Black America and a Ghana and a Jamaica and a Panama is because of European imperialism. So none of those groupings are authentic to any sort of pre-colonial identity of any of them. Right. So So I've already sent the email. I just sent the email to December 12th. So we'll see. See.
I just want to say about the Asian American stuff. There are studies that actually show, they've been done studies that showed in surveys when Asian Americans identify with the Asian American label, they're actually more likely to identify with the person of color label.
Interesting.
So it's a different spell when you're doing a more sub-ethnic identify. And I've seen it. If I've been around Indian Americans who are, again, mostly all of whom are Hindu and a certain kind of Hindu, upper caste Hindu, where they will say if something attacks the Indian American experience, it's very conservative attack. Like they're worried about like Hinduism being under attack rather than Islam also being, attacked. And they also think of it as very like, we're not Pakistani, we're not this or that. But with Indians, I know people my age and also some older people, when they say things like Desi or they say Asian, there is a likelihood that they're already like to your point about it's not the same thing, but a pan-African nature. You're seeking to harmonize your individuality with a group identity.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So that's why I'm so confused too when people say like you need to like somehow shift to this, but it's also stages. But the pan-African glue is a reworking of the mind to do the things you would need to do to then align yourself with other people. So the same thing, like if you look at certain studies, if people believe that they're strongly Asian American first, they're more than likely to be POC as well. And the same thing with certain Latinos as well. But when they start to think of themselves as Cuban first or not Mexican, because that's a different history too, same as African American, but certain other group like Dominican first, like I'm not Haitian, I'm Dominican, or I'm not black, I'm Dominican, then that's the issue. So that's where I also saw this book as fascinating because most of the Koreans were saying this is an anti-Korean attack. And I thought that was fascinating too. Like they didn't have the mentality. They already had a narrow mentality enough. And they were segueing into that to go deeper into like a certain kind of operation to work with white people too. So I found that really fascinating.
Well, that's an important reminder because they're also not only are they bringing in the baggage of an anti-blackness imposed by a Western influenced education, but they're also bringing in their own historical struggles with other Asian groups. And yeah, to most of us in the United States, we're not encouraged to be sensitive to that. So yeah, a Korean I could see why a Korean is gonna be like, don't you dare think of me as no Japanese.
Yes.
Like, don't you, like, don't make that like,
or Chinese.
Or Chinese, don't think
because of the anti-communism.
All of that.
Yeah.
And then all of these histories of everybody over there invading each other and all these other, like they have their own, like they have all of these histories.
Right.
And like, it wasn't that many years ago. I remember when Japan was in some global beef with China over the history textbooks.
Yeah.
Like you all are lying on us in your own history. It's like, or vice versa. One of them was doing, it was like,
Japan was worried because China was including a lot of quote unquote, I would say real history, but anti-Japanese. And they also have video games coming out, I think, or movies coming out, like a whole, but they've been doing that. Yeah. So to your point, but the generational stuff is the other thing that I found really fascinating because there is Asian Americans like me who've grown up here, and there's a different environment we grew up in just because of what we were taught. But what I wonder, to your earlier point, I do think Asian American kids, even black kids, are now growing up in an environment where it's actually more socially conservative to history. I actually think that's what I meant. Like, I think it's worse. I think it's actually getting worse where they're introduced. I think that I'm not trying to give like props to millennials, but I think I grew up in a sweet spot where wokeness was at least like there more often, like in terms of like even teachers, at least for me being like, because I had teachers growing up who gave you looks in Queens if you said anything that was wrong about Malcolm X. Like I remember this one teacher, I forget, I think it's Mrs. I don't want to put her name out there, but it's long ago, and she's African American, and there was this one black kid who literally said to her or mumbled something to her. I was like 8 years old, and he was like, "Didn't Malcolm, wasn't he like mean or violent?" And she gave him a look, didn't say anything. And I was telling my girlfriend the other day about it because I talked about it for the show, and I was like, but the look was so critical for me because she didn't say a single word and looked at him. And she just leaned forward and said, I remember this. He fought for you. And I'm not trying to romanticize it, but I think there was like a little bit of that era, but now that's being taken away. So I do worry now about the Asian. So again, she's saying, I love this book because it's basically saying culture is not natural. There's no natural Asian culture. There's no, like you said, there's no natural Black identity per se. It has to be constructed, and it is constructed. So I could honestly see Asian American kids growing up more conservative. But that's not because they're Asians, because like to your point about the media environment, I think it's also worse because you're getting so-called independent media, but it's not independent. So it's actually like sneakier. You can have an AI video where an Asian American person might be saying some awful things about Black people, and they are doing it, they're saying it to kids who are growing up with no accountability because their parents are working. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is life. So that's why I worry about that. And that's why I like this book so much, because it does it so simply. It just teaches us again in a very, and it's not Marxist, but in a very materialist sense. Culture is not something you're born with. I know it's very obvious to everyone in the chat, but I love this book because I see so many Asians do the same thing. Asians do this. Asians love education. And I'm like, I've taught Asian kids. They do not love education. So like they're some of them say things to me where they're like, I don't want to read this. I'm like, you're going to read this. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, nobody is born
right
liking or disliking education more than some other group. Those kinds of things are just absurd.
And family, I've had Asian Americans and some Latinos who say things in I have journal entries where they do it, and they say things like, I don't know where it comes from, but like families, like we're big families. And I used to type big essays sometimes to them and saying like, everyone has families. Like everyone can, what are you talking about big families for? I know what you're trying to say.
It's all propagandizing labor, because it's the same thing. Like,
Yes.
you know, when, you know, it's like, you know, I work at McDonald's, we're better than Wendy's. I work, you know, like or even within the job, it's like, we who work on the grill are better than people who wash the dishes. You know, like we're a better group of people than the dishwashers, and because I'm a fry cook. You know, we get into all that. Like even in the of course in the Navy it was the same thing. Oh, I'm in weapons division. We culturally are better than the people who are in whatever. Like it's all even by division, you know, and it's all to motivate. So like in boot camp, they had us competing with, like, we almost got into a fight with this other division, and a buddy of mine actually, he yelled at the room. He was like, we're all in the same Navy. But we were all being convinced, no, we're better because culturally, just by the number we were given when we were assigned to this company at boot camp, we're better than, you know, I'm 54, you're 42. I'm better. You know, it's also stupid. It's so stupid. But anyway, so yeah. Look, Sudip, what do you? I invite people to check out your Substack. The link is in the show description. If you want to, you got something.
Yeah.
Coming up, you want to?
Yeah. Speaking of education and Asians, I'm an Asian American teaching some things online. Like, I just really quickly,
you're just doing what you're culturally predisposed to do. No
hard work, no skill, no extra reading. I just woke up with a book under my hand.
It's who you are.
Yeah, it just went through me, and I was like, my eyes turned like green. I woke up. So with that, ability, I think she just really,
exactly.
With that ability.
Maintenance staff is better than janitorial staff. Exactly.
Right.
Well, go
ahead.
Anyway,
go ahead.
No, it's just my first trip to Cuba was to go to Guantanamo when I first joined the Navy, and on the base and I think it was called Post 46 was the bar, and I was only there for about a week, and almost every night that I, of course, went to the bar, there was a fight between sailors and Marines. And it was just, and it was that same thing. Well, culturally, we're better than you, and culturally, we're better than you. It's just so, but all of it was done to get people to be motivated to do their specific task. And it was something one of the few things I recognized early on, and I never got involved with any of that. Because it was like, no. They're just telling me I'm special so that I do a better job cleaning the floor. You know what I'm saying? They're just telling me you're better than me so that when you get sent to go shoot somebody, you're more willing to do it. We're not really better or worse than one another. Like they just want me to do a better job cleaning someone's toilet. So I'll be proud because in my division, we scrub toilets.
I mean, to your point, the reason why I brought it up is also actually to say that as much as culture is created on us, we can create it, because you have cultures that's just only because I have students who, rightly or wrongly, who are still kids, even though they're 18 or 19, they're still kids to me. They come thinking like Asians do this, we do this, and Black folks do this. And they also meaningfully do it for each other, like not in any mean way. Like some Black folks are like, Black students are like, oh, Asians do this really well. And then Asians say the same thing about Black folks, but they're still stereotypes of a certain kind. And they still come from the place like they're born with it. And I just tell them, culture is made, you can make culture. Like American culture right now, why do you think people identify so much with products as their identity? It's not born. Nike shoes and I don't know, cars are not naturally forming, and it's not natural that people wake up wanting these things, even if they have something. So that's the only reason why I brought it up, is because I think in the book they show the other side of that equation, where December 12th was trying to re-engineer culture, and they did succeed. One of the successful things about December 12th is that they re-engineered some a level of culture, or connected with that part of culture of Haitian identity, of Blackness, where they have this connective so they didn't have to reinvent everything, but they identified with it. And I just pictured like limbs, like muscles sort of twisting together in the legs so they can run faster. Like that's what I pictured when I saw it. That's what culture can do. Like they did that work of saying, hey, we identify with your history. You're Haitian, we're Black, we're African American, we're Black, and we now are faced with similar sources of pain. Whether it not be exacting, we have similar sources. Because she mentioned repeatedly that Haitian Americans were undercounted because a lot of them are undocumented at that point. So that is something that a lot of African Americans may not deal with, but they still said we had some similar sources of pain. And in that case, it was with whites who are racist and controlling the state power, and Koreans who were contributing to that. So I also wanted to say that on the other end, like saying how culture can be reimagined.
And it's also important because what this book also demonstrates is that what we have today in the Jamal Bryants and the Al Sharptons is that that's the only group that they're the group that won.
I agree.
The December 12th wing, with all due respect, lost. And so when boycotts are revisited as a tactic today, it's with the more complicit or liberal wing of it, without the designs, without the prior political consciousness, education, or organization taking place, and without an appropriate set of demands.
Right.
So
and post demands, because like with the Target stuff, people do it, which is fine. Like I've done it too. I did stop going to Target, but then the thing is, at the end, like you said, I think Renee and you discussed how at the end someone claimed victory. But the person who claimed victory for the Target boycott, like who gave them that power to claim victory? Like at least December 12th movement was the movement that came in and said, we're leading this. And then they did the work to prove themselves and to build the movement up. They weren't just some random guy with maybe an Instagram page who comes through, or might be some person with a certain amount of power. And then they're like, oh, we won. And then I think that person was put forward as the negotiator with Target or something. And it was very bizarre, because I think you and Renee were raising how did that even happen? Like who elected them, which is undemocratic. December 12th is democratic. They came to the Haitian community and said, we've had these issues. We'll work with you. We will fill the gaps in terms of activism and organizers. And by the way, for 16 months, they did have pickets out there, even though she did say there were not as many people, but they had picketers and they had marchers. And again, the only way the Korean store survived was through donations. I think that is very critical. Like it wasn't just a lost cause. It was made into a lost cause because of all these structural factors that the other side had. Now, how to overcome them? I think that's a question to ask another time. Like, how do you then, because I kept asking like what to do next, how to do. Sometimes you just have to maybe reckon with the fact at this moment, you're not, I wouldn't say ready, but maybe you need other avenues of support. But the real reason why the boycott fell apart was not because of December 12th. It was because Koreans did not side with them. The South Korean state supported them. And then you had a white power apparatus. And to your point, Black elected leaders who did not step up. That is the agency that was missing.
And even a more liberal wing of a Black activist community that did
right.
Step up to be. So again, that's what I'm saying. The more appropriate analysis of December 12th was struggling against so many different things, and that's why you know, a little bit, it was a little bit depressing, and that's why a little bit even I understand some of my and our own struggles today around some of these arguments, because we're trying to walk a nuanced line through this created minefield and battle zone of bad ideas and corrupt politics. So again, why I appreciated you joining me in this project, and I look forward to next steps in our next edition.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
For the classes thing, and we can wrap up, because if people are interested, I am teaching classes now online, because academia, to your point, is not great. People aren't protected as much there, and freedom of speech is being curtailed. I'm going for my degree, and right now it's just difficult because they're cutting classes left and right. They don't want to teach this stuff. That's why I reference that it's really worse, I think. But I'm teaching classes online with the level of expertise that I actually do have, that I was born with from day one, about these issues. So I'm teaching a race and ethnicity class tomorrow at night, which is like a 101. But it's the intention of that class is to talk about issues related to our communities, Asian, Black, and Latino, and Indigenous. It's not just, so that's what I'm doing. It's not for debate bro. And then I'm teaching on Octavia Butler, Fanon. So if people are interested, like you did, really great. Thank you so much again. It's in the Substack link. Just click on the Substack and you'll find the posts that say very openly, I'm doing classes. So thank you.
That's what's up. Now, everybody check it out if you can. And no, thanks again, Sudip. I appreciate this. And thanks again to the Undefeated chat. Please do like, share, subscribe, do all the things to support that you can. And we'll be back with the next installment of the Donut King Project. Peace, everybody. Only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And since, of course, we did mention buying power, let me, as we wrap, end with this beautiful reminder.
And we should support Black businesses. We got to support Black. You know, my buddy Jared Ball, Dr. Ball, who is at Morgan State, talks about this myth of Black buying power. Another brother who teaches at Duke University, Sandy Darity, says, you know, we can't pool our money together and using that, buy our way out of oppression.
Right.
This is
never buy your way out.
You can't buy your way out. We can't create enough millionaires in a capitalist society. It just can't. Nick, as much money as you do or don't have, you can't write a check for everything you worth and free us.
Right.
It's not possible in a capitalist society.
Right.
I mean, LeBron James, that's great, brother. You're an employee.
Yeah.
You could be making $100 million a year, but guess what? Any cat that can write you a check for $100 million a year is making more money than you can count. You know what I'm saying?
And it's unfortunate because we do have so many.
And what did you sacrifice? Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.